Daily life for most Maya people revolve around family, local trade, seasonal festivals, and agricultural routine. They worship gods of rain, sun, maize, earth, death, and creation. Ritual objects filled homes, clay figurines, incense burners, grinding stones, woven mats, and simple altars. Even ordinary people believe their actions contributed to cosmic balance. Religious festivals involved music, dancing, feasting, and performance, displaying strong communal unity. Yet the same religion also demanded blood sacrifice. Workers pricked their skin, nobles offered deeper wounds, and at times, captured enemies were killed for divine balance. For centuries, this system worked. But beneath the cultural brilliance lay tension. Kings competed for territory and prestige, building monuments at a faster rate to honor ancestors and legitimize their rule. Nobles demanded resources to maintain elite lifestyles, placing greater burdens on common people. Farmers cleared more land, stressing the environment. Cities grew larger and closer together, increasing competition. Everything that made Maya civilization powerful, religion, hierarchy, expansion, population growth, architectural ambition, slowly became a source of vulnerability. By understanding this social foundation, the collapse becomes less mysterious. The system was magnificent but rigid, prosperous but demanding. Over time, stresses accumulated until the structure could no longer support its own weight. The Maya were not doomed by ignorance or primitiveness, but by the same forces that challenge societies today: inequality, resource strain, political rivalry, and environmental change. If we want to understand how the Maya civilization eventually collapsed, we must also look at their intellectual achievements, because these cultural strengths shaped their identity, worldview, and eventually their response to crisis. The geometric and mythic complexity seen on palace murals gave way to everyday imagery carved into household objects. Symbols of elites, jaguar thrones, serpent headdresses, and god-king portraits began disappearing from common artifacts, replaced by agricultural symbols such as maize, gourds, beans, and water motifs. These new artistic themes reveal what mattered most to people during collapse: food security, climate, community survival, and local spirits. Social memory also evolved. For centuries, Maya scribes recorded history on stele, codices, ceramics, and murals. Literacy among scribes was highly advanced. But after abandonment, writing became less common. Knowledge shifted to oral tradition. Myths, genealogies, and histories were passed down through storytelling rather than carved inscriptions. While this transition reduced the amount of written evidence available to archaeology, it preserved identity in flexible and resilient ways. Storytelling allowed history to adapt over generations, surviving long after the collapse of political institutions. An often overlooked consequence of abandonment is the reshaping of gender roles. Archaeological discoveries suggest that women became primary cultural stabilizers during migration. While men engaged in warfare or traveled searching for resources, women preserved household rituals, agricultural knowledge, and language continuity. Weaving industries, often dominated by female artisans, continued through collapse, spreading stylistic patterns into new regions. In this way, women became key agents of cultural transmission, ensuring that Maya identity endured even as royal courts vanished. Another major cultural transformation involved the perception of royalty. For centuries, kings were considered divine, immortal through lineage. But after collapse, royal imagery faded. Without the constant visual reinforcement of crowns, banners, stele, and parades, the younger generations grew up without attachment to dynastic identity. Instead of being citizens of Tikal or Copan, they became members of villages, or traveling families. The idea that a single individual could rule thousands became less credible. Political decentralization became normalized. Communal cooperation replaced state organization. Smaller communities practiced collective farming, shared water sources, and distributed labor more evenly. These shifts reflect social resilience. Humans adapt most successfully through cooperation, not isolation. The Maya demonstrated this repeatedly. When cities failed, they rebuilt village networks that endured far longer than the monumental capitals themselves. Environmental adaptation also took a new direction. Some migrants settled near rivers or lakes. Others moved to the Caribbean coast or highland valleys with cooler temperatures. Families diversified crops, growing drought-resistant plants and using new soil techniques. Evidence shows increased reliance on wild foods, roots, fruits, nuts, and forest animals, suggesting people developed flexible diets. This adaptation demonstrates that the Maya collapse was not a failure of intelligence, but a shift in strategy. Emotionally, abandonment required courage. People did not simply walk away from empty buildings. They walked away from their ancestors' shadows. Leaving the burial places of loved ones must have created deep grief. Many families buried ritual items before moving on. Figurines, incense burners, carved stones, and heirlooms. These offerings symbolize final farewells to sacred spaces, demonstrating that abandonment was not a cold economic decision, but a spiritual journey. The collective memory of abandoned cities lived on. Even after cities were empty, the Maya did not forget them. Later post-classic populations visited ruins to perform rituals, retrieve relics, or retell ancestral stories. Some ruins became pilgrimage sites. Others became feared places believed to be guarded by spirits. Unlike some civilizations whose abandoned cities faded from cultural meaning, the Maya continued remembering their urban past for generations. Ultimately, the abandonment of Maya cities demonstrates how human societies transform rather than simply collapse. The Maya adjusted their worldview, rebuilt identity at smaller scale, protected cultural traditions from erasure, and reshaped daily life around new environmental realities. Their disappearance from the great cities does not represent extinction. It represents resilience. By the end of the 9th century, the southern lowlands had largely emptied. The rainforest began swallowing pyramids, court buildings, and palace halls. Yet people lived on, farming new lands, forming new alliances, praying in new ways, and raising children who spoke Maya languages and carried Maya blood. This was not the end. It was the transition into the next chapter of Maya history. The collapse of the southern Maya capitals marks one of the most dramatic phases in the fall of the classic Maya world. While drought, warfare, and political breakdown had been building for generations, it was in the great southern lowland capitals. Cities like Tikal, Copan, Caracol, Dos Pilas, Aguatica, Piedras Negras, and Yaxchilan, that the decline became irreversible. These cities had once represented the pinnacle of Maya engineering, astronomy, kingship, and cultural identity. Their pyramids reached skyward, their palaces echoed with royal power, and their plazas drew thousands for ritual events. Yet by the 9th century, this brilliant world began to fragment under forces too large and intertwined to control. Southern Maya capitals depended on dense populations, complex food distribution networks, and rigid political hierarchies. Their power came from control over farmland, tribute flows, trade networks, military might, and cosmic legitimacy. But when environmental stress struck, these same strengths became weaknesses. A system built to support vast numbers of people collapsed under scarcity. Cities so large required constant agricultural surplus. When the drought cycles hit hardest in the southern regions, those surpluses evaporated. Without food, infrastructure failed. Without infrastructure, people left. Without people, the capitals lost meaning. Tikal, one of the most iconic Maya capitals, illustrates this transformation. After centuries of dominance, it experienced a partial resurgence in the 8th century under powerful rulers like Chichén Itzá. But the revival masked deeper structural damage. By the mid-9th century, monument building ceased at Tikal. The last known dated inscription from the city appears around 869 CE. After that, silence. The carving tradition ended abruptly, showing that scribes, artisans, or royal authority had vanished. Archaeologists also discovered that public buildings began to crumble without maintenance, and fewer burials occurred near royal temples, signs that people were relocating away from ceremonial cores. This abandonment did not happen because Tikal was forgotten, but because surviving there became impossible. Copán, another major southern capital, faced similarly devastating decline. Located in modern-day Honduras, Copán thrived through art, astronomy, and intellectual achievement. Its stelae are among the most detailed narratives in the Maya world, and its famous hieroglyphic stairway represents an extraordinary archive of royal history carved into stone. Yet beneath its cultural brilliance lay agricultural fragility. The hillsides around Copán were terraced to support farming for a huge population. When soil erosion worsened during prolonged drought, farmlands collapsed. Hunger spread quickly, undermining elite authority. The last significant stela at Copán dates to 822 CE, marking the reign of King Uxmal. After his rule, the dynasty suddenly ended. Palaces were later reused by squatters, and elite compounds show signs of rapid abandonment. Dos Pilas and Aguatica represent another collapse pattern driven heavily by warfare. These sister cities, ruled by the same dynasty, were built in strategic defensive positions in the Patexbaden region. Their kings, ambitious and warlike, spent decades entangling themselves in conflicts between Tikal and Calakmul. When political tides shifted, the region fell into extreme violence. Dos Pilas was burned and abandoned. Aguatica was destroyed during an invasion, its royal palace left filled with abandoned tools and half-carved monuments. Archaeologists found obsidian weapons scattered across palace floors, proof that daily life was interrupted by sudden attack. The collapse here was not gradual starvation, it was violent implosion. Caracol, once one of the largest Maya cities ever recorded, suffered a different fate. Its monumental architecture and enormous population could not be sustained as drought intensified. Researchers found increasing signs of internal revolt, suggesting that anger toward ruling elites may have driven civil conflict. When food systems failed and tribute demands became unbearable, ordinary people pushed back. Evidence at Caracol points to assassination events, burned palaces, and smashed royal monuments. Collapse here was political rebellion, a society turning against the very structure it had built. Across these southern capitals, one shared pattern stands out: the disappearance of elite artistry and literacy. Inscriptions stop. Art styles change from elegant detail to crude symbolism. Royal tombs lose wealth. Jewelry workshops shut down. Elite identity evaporates. As literacy weakened, dynasties faded into memory. The decline of southern capitals also destabilized regional identity. These cities have been cultural leaders for centuries, producing the most spectacular architecture and housing the most powerful rulers. Their collapse created cultural shockwaves. Smaller satellite communities dependent on these capitals for trade and guidance suddenly lost leadership. Some attempted independence, while others abandoned their regions entirely. The collapse also shifted trade patterns. Jade networks broke down, obsidian distribution changed direction, and salt routes shifted north. Economies that once flowed through southern capitals rerouted toward northern cities and coastal ports. Southern collapse thus reshaped the entire map of Maya civilization. The countryside surrounding the capitals also fell apart. Without elite direction, agricultural systems declined rapidly. Terraces, irrigation canals, and reservoirs collapsed. Food production plummeted. Once these systems broke, recovery became impossible. Starving populations left their homeland to seek better opportunities elsewhere. It is important to remember that collapse was not uniform. Some southern capitals remained partially inhabited for decades after royal power ended, but their identities changed. They became villages rather than kingdoms, places of memory rather than political power. What makes the southern collapse especially striking is the contrast. These were not weak towns struggling from their beginning. They were giants of the ancient world. Their fall was not inevitable. It was the result of multiple crises converging: drought, war, rebellion, trade collapse, agricultural exhaustion, and ideological breakdown. By studying their end, we understand the human consequences of environmental and political instability. Southern Maya capitals remind us that societies can rise to magnificent heights and still crumble when their foundations weaken. Their ruins today are breathtaking not because they are mysterious, but because they represent the last echo of a civilization that once believed its strength would last forever. To understand the collapse of the southern Maya capitals in its full depth, we must examine the internal social fractures that accompanied environmental struggle and military failure. While drought and warfare were powerful triggers, the southern lowlands collapsed because the internal mechanisms that once held cities together stopped functioning. Class relations broke down, trust evaporated, religion shifted, and identity splintered into competing local loyalties. This internal collapse began slowly, almost invisibly, as the first cities weakened, but it accelerated rapidly when populations realized the old order no longer guaranteed survival. One of the clearest signs of internal breakdown was the collapse of class hierarchy. In the classic Maya world, elites dominated cultural life. They controlled water access, agricultural rights, astronomical knowledge, and diplomatic relationships. The nobility lived luxuriously, wore jade ornaments, and hosted elaborate feasts. Their power depended on a steady flow of tribute from commoners. But when drought reduced crop yields and warfare made tribute routes unsafe, elites could no longer sustain their lifestyle. Archaeologists have discovered elite residences abandoned more quickly than common homes, indicating nobles fled cities earlier than farmers did. This pattern suggests elites feared the rising instability or recognized their authority collapsing before commoners did. In some southern capitals, revolt appears to have erupted. Caracol, Dos Pilas, and parts of Copan show traces of internal uprising. Burned palaces, smashed royal imagery, defaced portrait stelae, and violently torn floors. Others preserved older texts by repainting walls or carving deeper in a stone so messages would survive erosion. These acts show pride and knowledge, even at the brink of collapse. We also see signs that scientific knowledge influenced migration. People relocating north to the Yucatan brought expertise with them. This transfer explains why cities like Chichén Itzá rapidly became astronomical powerhouses. Northern builders incorporated central lowland innovations: ball courts, pyramid staircases aligned to Venus, and ceremonial platforms acting as horizon markers. Collapse was not lack of knowledge, it was redistribution. A particularly important cultural shift was the rise of prophecy tradition. Maya texts from the collapse period show greater emphasis on cyclical time and world endings. People interpreted drought as cosmic transition. Calendrical cycles predicted endings followed by rebirth. This worldview prevented total despair. Even as cities died, culture believed in renewal. Far from representing intellectual destruction, the final century before collapse reveals a civilization using science, astronomy, and writing to cope with catastrophe. Knowledge both guided and burdened Maya society. It helped people understand their place in time, but also reminded them how much they were losing. The greater the scientific history, the heavier the emotional weight of collapse. To complete our examination of Maya science and knowledge before collapse, we must look at how intellectual culture interacted with religion, myth, political legitimacy, and everyday survival. Maya scientific thinking was not an isolated academic field. It was woven into the social fabric. Astronomy determined when kings performed ceremonies, when farmers planted maize, and when armies marched. Mathematics shaped architecture and ritual timing. The written word preserved cosmic memory, shaping identity from birth to death. When these systems entered crisis, every aspect of Maya cultural life shifted. At the heart of Maya science stood cosmology, the belief that the universe had structure, pattern, and meaning. The Maya did not separate astronomy from spirituality. Stars and planets were living beings, gods whose movements communicated divine intention. The Milky Way was a sacred road connecting the earthly world to the underworld. The sun represented rebirth each morning, burning across the sky as a hero defeating darkness. Venus symbolized war and kingship. Its rising often marked the timing of battles. These cosmological beliefs gave Maya science emotional power. Observing the sky was not merely data collection, it was spiritual reading. When collapse threatened the world beneath their feet, Maya astronomers looked to the sky for answers. Terminal classic inscriptions include references to unusual celestial events, Venus tables rewritten, eclipse warnings carved on temple walls, and unusual star symbols indicating cosmic change. Some scholars believe Maya intellectuals interpreted drought and war as signs of a cosmic ending cycle. According to Maya mythology, the universe had been created and destroyed multiple times before. The long count calendar recorded world ages spanning thousands of years, and the Maya believed humanity lived within only one era of many. If their world seemed to be ending, perhaps it was following divine order. This worldview may have reduced the sense of panic, replacing despair with cosmic acceptance. Collapse hurt bodies and cities, but in Maya cosmology, collapse was not final death, it was transformation. This belief preserved identity even as cities emptied. Another area worth examining is literacy. Writing was a powerful intellectual tool used by kings and scribes to record genealogy, cosmos, tribute, and history. But writing also served psychological functions. When societies write their stories, they assert identity and permanence. During collapse, writing slowed drastically, and this silence left emotional scars. Without inscriptions, individuals lost recorded memory. No records of births, rituals, victories, marriages, or royal bloodlines. A world that once defined itself by carved history became a world remembered only through oral tradition. Yet writing practices did not vanish entirely. Pottery, murals, and graffiti continued to carry script symbols even as monumental inscriptions stopped. This shows that Maya literacy did not die. It adapted. The written word democratized to some degree, leaving royal halls and entering everyday spaces. Some graffiti inscriptions discovered in abandoned palaces appear to be names or messages scratched by people who lived there after royal elites fled. These inscriptions, though primitive, reveal the continued human urge to write identity even in crisis. The collapse period also influenced mathematical thinking, with a breakdown of elite-sponsored scientific institutions. Complex calculations became rarer, yet basic mathematics persisted in market systems, agriculture, and household construction. The Maya number system survived because it was practical, efficient, and embedded within daily life. Numerical record-keeping continued through knotted strings, painted symbols, and carved marks on household objects. Knowledge adapted to serve those who remained rather than those who ruled. Medicine changed too. Earlier Maya medical tradition involved a blend of empirical knowledge and spiritual interpretation. Healers treated wounds, set bones, administered herbs, and performed ritual cleansing therapies. During collapse, medical practice likely expanded out of necessity. Trauma injuries from warfare increased. Malnutrition, dehydration, and infection required innovative responses. The archaeological record shows increased use of certain medicinal plants during later centuries, indicating adaptation within healing knowledge. Architecture reveals the last breath of Maya science. Grand astronomical complexes like those at Uxmal or Palenque were no longer being built. But small-scale structures show scientific awareness continued. Houses in some collapse-era villages align with cardinal directions, indicating lasting cosmological structure. Hearth placements maintained symbolic orientation, suggesting cultural values remained intact. Even when the monumental world fell, personal worlds echoed the scientific logic of ancestors. One major intellectual legacy emerged from migration. As southern cities collapsed, scientific traditions dispersed into new cultural regions. The Maya in northern Yucatan absorbed the astronomical knowledge of the south and expanded upon it. At Chichén Itzá, builders aligned El Castillo Pyramid so that shadows form a serpent shape during equinox sunsets. This demonstrates the survival and even evolution of astronomical architecture after the collapse. The famous Temple of the Warriors and ball courts echo southern ritual science blended with northern influence. This cultural fusion produced a post-classic renaissance, proving knowledge outlived political disaster. Maya timekeeping also persisted well beyond the fall. Traditional Maya calendars are still used today by Maya communities in Guatemala and Mexico. Daykeepers calculate ceremonial cycles using Tzolk'in numerology, interpreting human destiny and agricultural luck. This enduring living tradition proves collapse was not cultural erasure, only political restructuring. Language, another crucial component of intellectual identity, also survived. Ancient Maya script faded, but spoken Maya languages flourished. Today, more than 6 million people speak Maya languages: Yucatec, Kich, Kakshikal, Mam, Keki, and many others. These languages carry echoes of ancient cosmology, mathematics, and ritual vocabulary. They represent intellectual continuity across more than 1,000 years. The Maya collapse highlights a universal truth. Civilizations fall when systems supporting knowledge fail, not when knowledge itself disappears. Maya science required institutional scaffolding, scribal schools, royal libraries, observatories, priestly hierarchies. When those institutions collapsed due to drought, famine, war, and migration, knowledge shifted into private hands. Scholars no longer served kings, they served families. Astronomers no longer carved stone, they remembered sky cycles orally. This transition preserved knowledge in different form, preventing total erasure. It also protected Maya identity from being solely defined by its monumental past. By decentralizing knowledge, Maya civilization survived beyond the fall of cities. In a symbolic sense, the story of Maya science mirrors the story of Maya collapse. Just as cities transitioned into forests, scientific thought transitioned into memory, myth, and oral tradition. The material expression faded, but the intellectual core endured. The great tragedy is not that Maya science vanished, because it did not. The tragedy is that so much recorded information was lost when scribal production stopped. Imagine how many astronomical tables, medical recipes, star maps, genealogical histories, and mathematical treatises were never copied into codices because society fell apart. These unrecorded works represent invisible cultural losses, fragments of brilliance now gone forever. Yet the resilience of Maya thought reminds us that collapse is not the opposite of intelligence. It is the opposite of stability. When stability ended, the Maya world did not stop thinking. It changed how thinking was stored, from stone to paper to memory. That evolution kept Maya identity alive long after classic cities died. When the southern capitals crumbled and the monumental cities of the Petén region fell silent beneath the weight of drought, war, and political breakdown, the Maya world did not end. Instead, power, population, and cultural energy shifted northward into the Yucatan Peninsula. The northern lowlands, home to cities like Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, Cobá, Mayapán, and numerous smaller centers, became the core of post-classic Maya civilization. These cities did not merely inherit the remnants of Southern culture. They reimagined Maya identity, combining Southern traditions with new ideas, new alliances, and new political forms. This transformation represented a rebirth rather than a disappearance, proving that the Maya collapse was never a single civilization-ending event, but a geographical and ideological transition. The northern lowlands were environmentally different from the south. They lacked the dense rivers and lakes of Petén and instead relied on cenotes, natural limestone wells formed by geological collapse. These deep freshwater pools allowed communities to thrive even in regions with thin soil and harsh dry seasons. Because of this, drought cycles that devastated the south did not strike the north with equal force. While southern reservoirs failed, cenotes offered reliable water sources year-round. Archaeological evidence shows consistent water levels in some northern cenotes even during the 9th century drought peaks, giving northern cities the natural resilience southern capitals lacked. Northern Maya cities also developed different agricultural systems. Southern terracing and swamp field farming depended on stable rain cycles, but northern communities relied on milpa forests and seasonal rainfall patterns more tolerant of environmental fluctuation. Farmers planted maize among fruit trees and wild vegetation, protecting soil moisture and reducing erosion. This landscape allowed northern cities to support large populations without collapsing under agricultural strain. In essence, the environment gave rise to a new center of Maya civilization at the same moment the South was dying. Chichén Itzá emerged as the most powerful of these northern centers. Unlike southern dynastic cities, Chichén Itzá practiced a mixed political structure combining Maya traditions with influences from central Mexico, especially the Toltecs. This hybrid political model is visible in its architecture. The Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichén Itzá, known today as El Castillo, blends Maya astronomical engineering with Toltec symbolism. Its staircases represent solar cycles, while feathered serpent imagery surrounding it reflects international cultural exchange. Such architectural fusion demonstrates that the North was not merely inheriting Maya culture, but expanding it through global contact. The rise of northern cities also reveals an important psychological dimension. Migration brought southern refugees, scholars, artisans, and farmers into new land. These migrants carried knowledge, stories, and cultural pride with them. When they arrived in the north, they strengthened population density and enriched cultural complexity. Some scholars believe that migrants from Copan or Tikal helped shape the intellectual revival at Chichén Itzá. Their influence appears in advanced stela carving, architectural techniques, and ritual iconography. Thus, southern collapse became northern opportunity, and migration sowed seeds of Renaissance. Northern cities did not emerge immediately after southern abandonment. They had deep histories predating collapse. Cobá, for example, flourished centuries before Tikal weakened. It controlled long sakbiab, white stone roads that stretched across the peninsula for miles. These roads connected isolated settlements into cultural networks. Meanwhile, Uxmal completed its famous pyramid of the magician and nunnery quadrangle during the same era the South was beginning to struggle. These cities were already strong, and southern collapse simply opened space for them to dominate. The new political structure of the North differed from the kingship model once seen across the Maya region. While dynastic rulers continued to exist, power became more diffuse. In some centers, councils of nobles shared authority. In others, warrior orders supported rulers rather than royal bloodlines alone. This shift away from divine kingship reflected lessons learned from the South. The divine kingship system had failed in the face of drought and warfare. The North moved toward collective governance, embedding checks and balances into government. Northern cities also thrived because they embraced trade networks more aggressively. The Yucatan Peninsula served as a bridge between the Caribbean and Gulf of Mexico, connecting the Maya world to distant cultures. Chichén Itzá traded salt, cacao, cotton textiles, obsidian blades, copper bells, jade ornaments, and pottery across regions that stretched hundreds of miles. Cotton exports became especially profitable. Cloth production grew into a major industry, turning northern cities into commercial powerhouses. The importance of coastal exchange became clear in the post-classic period. Canoes traveled along the Caribbean coast, transporting salt, turtles, honey, copal, and feathers. Northern Maya traders sailed as far as Honduras and Veracruz. Because of maritime routes, northern cities did not depend on long-distance land caravans vulnerable to warfare. Trade continuity helped northern society remain stable even as the South fell apart. Culturally, the North also reimagined religion. While southern cities built massive temple mountains, northern centers favored columned halls, open plazas, and international symbolism. In the Temple of the Warriors at Chichén Itzá, carvings depict warriors wearing Toltec attire, a sign of cultural blending. Meanwhile, the cult of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity, expanded dramatically. Such evidence supports the theory that drought and labor shortages crippled water management. Once the water system failed, the city system followed. Household archaeology has been especially illuminating. Excavations of humble home sites reveal everyday reality, beliefs, diets, social identities, not just elite ritual. In late-period houses, objects become fewer and simpler. Fewer decorated pots, fewer imported goods, less jewelry. Household altars become more common, showing that religion moved inward as public ceremony declined. Tool kits shrink, revealing the collapse of craft specialization. These domestic details show life unspooling from a complex system into a simpler, survival-based world. The study of unfinished monuments is another compelling field. Many southern capitals contain stele halfway carved or left completely blank. Sculptors seem to have begun projects, but were forced to abandon them early. In some cases, glyph texts start but never finish, as if scribes vanished mid-sentence. This unfinished work is physical testimony to sudden collapse. Perhaps the most haunting evidence comes from sealed royal tombs. In several sites, elite burials dating from collapsed decades appear strangely poor. Jewelry is scarce. Jade is absent. Grave offerings consist mostly of plain ceramics. The spiritual and economic power once commanded by elites had utterly evaporated. Yet even these small offerings show that families retain devotion and cultural memory despite catastrophe. Archaeology proves that collapse was not destruction of knowledge or identity. It was transformation. Many objects found in northern and post-classic sites are stylistically connected to southern lowland traditions, demonstrating cultural continuity even after cities fell. The Maya did not lose themselves. They carried their civilization forward in new forms. The silent cities of the southern lowlands are therefore not monuments to disappearance. They're preserved pages of history. Through excavation, mapping, artifact analysis, and environmental reconstruction, archaeologists read the last lines of classic Maya civilization. And those lines tell us the truth. The collapse was real, but the people endured. One of the most remarkable aspects of Maya archaeology is how much of the collapse story comes not from royal monuments, but from the smallest objects buried beneath ancient floors. In the ruins of southern Maya capitals, archaeologists have uncovered kitchens, hearths, grinding stones, children's toys, bone needles, shell ornaments, figurines, personal altars, and even painted murals tucked inside domestic walls. These remains reveal not the lives of kings, but the lives of ordinary people. While inscriptions recorded battles and dynasties, household artifacts recorded emotional truth, anxiety, devotion, transformation, and memory. The material record shows us that the collapse of Maya cities was experienced most deeply through daily routines that fell apart piece by piece. Excavations at Tikal, for example, show clear shifts in household economy. Earlier layers contain pottery rich in decorative motifs, feathered serpents, gods, celestial symbols, geometric harmonies. But during the Terminal Classic period, the artistry becomes simpler. Pots are thinner, plainer, sometimes unevenly fired. Clay sources change, suggesting people used whatever material they could find, not what tradition demanded. This decline reflects more than economic hardship. It shows cultural exhaustion. When people face starvation and insecurity, art loses its central place, replaced by functionality and survival. Similarly, household altars become more frequent in later layers. Families carved miniature stele, simple offering bowls, and clay figurines to place within their homes. The presence of these objects indicates a major spiritual shift. Public religious spaces were losing authority. Plazas stood empty, priests were absent, and temples went unmaintained. Instead of abandoning religion, people internalized it, moving their gods into living rooms. This transition mirrors the spiritual privatization found in other collapsing civilizations. When institutions fail, faith retreats inward. Another fascinating archaeological pattern involves urban waste layers. Earlier city periods produced mountains of pottery shards, food remains, shell fragments, and imported artifacts, reflecting abundance and complex economy. But collapse-era waste layers shrink dramatically, showing reduced consumption and simpler diets. Burn patterns on bones and hearthstones reveal people cooked differently, using less fuel, smaller flames, and fewer ingredients. Burnt seed remains show experimentation with forest plants, nuts, and roots. People ate whatever they could gather rather than relying on crops alone. Archaeologists also study ancient soil to understand collapse dynamics. At sites like Karakol and Köpen, soil beneath abandoned terraces contains high levels of eroded sediment, revealing that hillside agriculture collapsed due to neglect. Irrigation canals filled with silt. Reservoir floors cracked without moisture. Abandoned infrastructure physically reshaped landscapes. In some cases, forests eventually returned, but the soil beneath them preserves scars from human struggle. Weapon findings provide another window into the collapse. Late classic layers show far more arrowheads and obsidian spear points than earlier layers. This spike reflects warfare intensification. In some southern cities, fortification walls surround palace districts, showing elites attempted to defend themselves from internal or external threats. But defenses often failed. Aguatica's final occupation layer contains charred palace walls and valuable objects scattered across hallways, indicating residents fled during sudden attack. Archaeologists call this a frozen moment, similar to Pompeii, an event preserved, not erased by disaster. Another pattern emerging from excavation is evidence of increased sacrifice and ritual desperation. Caches of human remains, sometimes placed beneath later construction layers, suggest communities intensified offerings in hopes of restoring cosmic order. Skeletal remains indicate differing age ranges from earlier sacrifice traditions. More children appear in the archaeological record toward the end of classic civilization. While interpretations vary, many scholars see these patterns as signs of deep cultural crisis. Sacrifices may have reflected fear that the gods had abandoned the world. Excavations also reveal surprising continuity, proving collapse was not total ruin. In abandoned palace complexes, archaeologists find evidence that squatters reused elite rooms. Simple hearths appear on palace floors. Stone benches, once used for royal ceremonies, became family beds. Broken ceremonial platforms were repurposed for food storage. These transformations show resilience. People continued living in cities even after elite culture vanished. Collapse was not instant abandonment. It was adaptation within ruin. Another line of evidence comes from chemical signatures in Maya ceramics. Pottery pigments and clay composition change over time, revealing shifting trade networks. Late classic pottery shows reduced access to distant clay sources. Regions that once traded pigments hundreds of kilometers away now used local materials, indicating trade networks shrank dramatically. This shrinking cultural geography supports historical models of regional fragmentation. Environmental archaeology adds yet another layer of insight. Pollen cores taken from lakes near Maya sites reveal decreasing diversity in plant life. Fields once rich with maize, squash, beans, and fruit trees revert to grasslands. This rewilding shows that farmland was abandoned faster than cities, demonstrating the economic trigger behind collapse. When food systems died, society followed. The archaeology of roads, known as Sakbiab, tells a similar story. These elevated white limestone pathways once connected cities across the lowlands, enabling rapid movement of goods and information. During the collapse era, Sakbiab fall into disuse. Overgrown and broken, they signal the end of cooperation between cities. When roads die, networks die. Perhaps the most moving archaeological discoveries are ritual farewell offerings. In houses and temples abandoned during the collapse period, researchers find caches of broken pottery, burnt incense, jade beads, and food remains intentionally placed before departure. These offerings appear to be symbolic closings, acts of respect to ancient spaces. They reveal that abandonment was conscious and emotional. People did not run blindly from ruins. They said goodbye. One extraordinary example is found at Cobá, where archaeologists uncovered a staircase painted with scenes of royal lineage. Near the end of occupation, someone deliberately buried shells and herbs beneath the steps, perhaps praying for the city to survive. The prayer went unanswered, but the ritual remains, preserved under centuries of soil. whisper the final hopes of a fading people. All of this archaeological evidence, dietary change, trade collapse, shrinking household wealth, ritual desperation, soil erosion, weapon proliferation, unfinished art, and farewell offerings, creates a powerful narrative. It shows gradual cultural unraveling intertwined with conscious human decision-making. Collapse was neither accidental nor sudden. It was lived slowly, painfully, and intelligently by people doing their best to survive. Most importantly, the archaeological record reveals that collapse was not the end of the Maya. Long after southern capitals fell, Maya cultural practices continued in the north, in the highlands, and in small farming communities. Pottery styles evolved, writing changed form, architecture adapted, and languages survived. Maya civilization endured beyond the stones of silent cities. Archaeology does more than uncover physical objects. It reconstructs vanished worlds through science, storytelling, and inference. To fully understand the collapse of the classic Maya, scholars look beyond monumental ruins and analyze microevidence. DNA stored in bone fragments, pollen locked in lake sediment, chemical signatures in pottery pigments, soot trapped in ancient plaster, and isotopes within human teeth. These forms of evidence allow researchers to see collapse not as legend, but as measurable history grounded in environment, biology, and technology. In many ways, the silent Maya cities speak through scientific data more clearly than through stone inscriptions. One of the most groundbreaking research fields is bioarchaeology, the study of ancient human remains. By examining teeth and bones from Maya burial sites, scientists can interpret diet, health, and migration patterns. Teeth contain isotopic signatures that reflect the water a person drank during childhood. If individuals buried in the southern lowlands show isotope patterns from distant regions, this indicates migration or population movement into collapsing cities. In several Maya sites, isotopic data reveals that migrants arrived from northern or eastern regions during the last decades of urban occupation, perhaps because those people hoped the great cities would provide resources during drought. Ironically, they arrived just as the old capitals were failing. Bone chemistry also reveals long-term malnutrition. High nitrogen and low carbon readings indicate heavy reliance on drought-resistant wild foods rather than maize agriculture. Bone lesions show chronic infection, likely due to weakened immune systems caused by hunger. When examined collectively, human remains show that collapse was not merely political. It was nutritional, emotional, and physical. These bones map suffering onto the landscape. This deity embodied movement, change, and rebirth, fitting symbolism for a society rising from the ashes of southern collapse. The Northern Renaissance demonstrated that Maya culture was not fixed. It evolved. The Maya adopted new architectural plans, like colonnaded palaces and wider plazas. They developed new writing style elements, incorporating pictorial imagery reminiscent of Central Mexican traditions. Even warfare changed. Northern Maya armies used new tactics and weapon types, including atlotl spear throwers. These cultural innovations created a distinct Northern Maya identity that coexisted with ancient tradition. Art also flourished in the north. Carved stone reliefs show battle scenes, sacrificial rituals, and mythological creatures. Fine ceramics reflect brilliant orange slips and black-on-red decorative painting. The famous Pyuk architectural style of Uxmal features intricate stone mosaics made with unparalleled precision. These artistic achievements prove Maya creativity was not weakened by collapse. It simply relocated. What is perhaps most remarkable about the rise of the North is that Maya civilization did not fracture into isolated pockets. Instead, it reorganized into a new geographical axis. The Maya remained Maya, speaking related languages, honoring ancient myths, observing astronomical cycles, and maintaining ritual calendars. Cities changed, but cultural heartlines endured. The rise of northern centers demonstrates a powerful lesson. Collapse in one region does not equal extinction. Civilizations breathe. They migrate, regroup, and transform. The Maya story challenges the simplistic notion that cultures die. Instead, they evolve in response to crisis. When the southern world crumbled, the north became a crucible of innovation and survival, preserving the legacy of a brilliant civilization. The rise of northern Maya power was not only a geographical shift, it represented a profound social, political, and cultural reorganization. Another important field is residue analysis, testing traces of food and chemicals on pottery shards. In earlier classic periods, residue shows cacao, maize beer, tamales, and fruit beverages, reflecting abundant trade and ceremonial feasting. But during the Terminal Classic, residue evidence becomes simpler: plain maize gruel, forest tubers, wild fruit. Trade beverages vanish. Luxury consumption disappears. Ceramics that once served ceremonial feasts ended their lives as basic cooking pots. These changes in diet mirror changes in society, from abundance to subsistence, from celebration to survival. Archaeologists also analyze household trash heaps called middens. The contents of middens show what people actually used and valued. In prosperous years, middens contain fancy pottery, gemstones, and imported shells. In collapse phases, middens hold broken tools, cheap local ceramics, burned seeds, and bones from small animals like rodents, evidence of desperate hunting. Midden layers also show sudden drops in trash volume, meaning population density plummeted. Fewer people create fewer garbage layers. Architectural archaeology contributes another layer to collapse understanding. At many southern sites, excavation reveals buildings constructed with poor quality masonry during the final years. Stones were reused, plaster was recycled, and temples lacked decorative carving. This architectural simplification is the visible imprint of declining resources. Grand temples require skilled labor and long-term planning. Desperate societies cannot invest in monumental futures. Laser scanning technology, known as LiDAR, has revolutionized Maya research. LiDAR penetrates forest canopy to reveal hidden city layouts. This technology has uncovered thousands of previously unknown structures: houses, terraces, roads, fortifications, and reservoirs, showing that Maya urbanization was far denser than anyone imagined. In some regions, population density rivaled medieval Europe. LiDAR also reveals abandoned farmland stretching across hillsides, proving that collapse erased not just cities, but entire agricultural worlds. Terraces once carved into mountain slopes now lie beneath centuries of vegetation, silent testimony to immense engineering effort. Archaeologists study climate signals preserved in stalagmites, formations inside caves that store rainfall data. These stone pillars grow slower or faster depending on moisture. When stalagmites are sliced and dated, climate records emerge. Many cave records from Belize and Guatemala reveal severe drought around 820 to 870 CE, matching collapse timelines. The stalagmite evidence shows rainfall dropping drastically, confirming drought theories with physical proof. The archaeological examination of warfare provides another dimension. At sites like Punta de Chimino and Cancuin, researchers have found defensive walls, watchtowers, and moats, unusual features for Maya cities known for openness. These fortifications date to the collapse period, proving that fear reshaped landscapes. In some cases, fortifications were never completed, suggesting builders abandoned construction mid-crisis, perhaps due to invasion or starvation. The archaeology of writing offers further insight. Late classic inscriptions become shorter, simpler, and more limited in number. Earlier Maya inscriptions were complex narratives connecting rulers to gods. Later inscriptions list only names and dates, lacking mythic context. Literacy weakened. The scribal class, once highly trained, shrunk. Writing traditions became unsustainable without elite support. Pottery kilns reveal industrial decline. During prosperous eras, Maya potteries produced thousands of uniform vessels using specialized molds. Collapse-era kilns, however, contain irregular products, showing that professional potters had vanished or no longer received patronage. This industrial decline rippled outward, influencing food storage, trade, and cultural identity. Burial archaeology provides one of the most intimate collapse perspectives. Earlier burials are elaborate, bodies dressed in jade jewelry, placed in carved limestone crypts, surrounded by offerings. Terminal classic burials, by contrast, are simple. Some contain only a pot or a single bead. Others show bodies placed directly in earth without chamber or ornamentation. That simplicity reflects economic poverty, but also cultural fatigue. Elaborate death rituals require stable communities, specialized workers, and leaders capable of coordinating burial rites. When society fractured, burial traditions fractured too. Archaeologists also study pollen within ancient soil samples to understand vegetation change. Early classic pollen samples show maize dominance, supported by beans, squash, and fruit orchards. Post-collapse pollen samples show wild grasses and shrubs replacing cultivated crops. This suggests fields were abandoned long before cities were deserted. When farmers left, food systems collapsed, making urban survival impossible. The most powerful archaeological insight is that collapse was not uniform or instantaneous. The Maya world changed gradually but decisively. Some cities declined decades earlier than others. Some resisted drought through deep reservoirs or robust trade networks. Some fell through warfare, others through internal revolt. Archaeology reveals diversity, not a single cause, but many intersecting in complicated ways. Finally, archaeology demonstrates cultural survival. Despite political collapse, Maya language families persisted. Ceremonial objects continued appearing in northern sites. Artistic motifs migrated, reshaped, and endured. Even writing traditions survived in post-classic codices. Archaeology proves that Maya identity transformed rather than vanished. Through scientific analysis, the silent cities speak. They show famine scars etched into bone, drought written into stalagmite rings, abandoned farms buried beneath pollen layers, and unfinished carvings marking societal interruption. Together, these forms of evidence reveal a civilization facing complex, overlapping disasters that no single king or city could overcome. The silent Maya cities remind us that ruins hold voices, not in sound but in stone. Archaeology listens to those voices and reconstructs the human experience of collapse. The fear, the resilience, the grief, and the hope embedded in every abandoned stairway and broken pot. Long before the Maya cities fell silent, before warfare ripped dynasties apart, before drought dried the reservoirs and famine starved the countryside, Maya civilization stood among the most intellectually advanced societies of the ancient world. Their achievements in mathematics, astronomy, engineering, writing, architecture, and botanical science were astonishing, not only for their time, but even by modern standards. To understand the drama of the collapse, we must first understand the brilliance of the world that fell. The tragedy of the Maya lies not in disappearance, but in the loss of a scientifically rich civilization whose accomplishments rivaled those of classical Greece or dynastic Egypt. The Maya were extraordinary astronomers. They built observatories, tracked planetary movements, and created complex models of the heavens. They recorded lunar cycles, solar eclipses, Venus transitions, and the movements of Mars and Jupiter. Structures like El Caracol and Chichén Itzá functioned as astronomical observatories, designed to align precisely with celestial events. Maya astronomers used shadow tracking, horizon markers, roof comb openings, and building orientation to measure the solar year with remarkable accuracy. Their solar calendar, the Hob, contained 365 days divided into 18 months of 20 days, plus a 5-day ritual period. In addition to the Hob, the Maya used the Tzolk'in, a 260-day ritual calendar combining numbers from 1 to 13 with a cycle of 20-day names. This 260-day calendar likely emerged from agricultural and spiritual rhythms, possibly tied to maize growth, human gestation, or cosmic numerology. Most famously, the Maya created the long count calendar, which tracked vast stretches of time using a base, 20 mathematical system. The Maya could calculate dates spanning thousands of years, documenting events both mythic and historical. Their system predicted solar events and structured religious ceremonies. The precision of Maya astronomy is astonishing. They calculated the solar year at 365.2420 days, only 0.0002 days off modern measurement. Their Venus tables predicted the planet's synodic cycle to within hours. They understood lunar nodes enough to predict eclipses. They tracked zenith sun passages, moments when the sun stands directly overhead, casting no observable shadow. These observations required centuries of continuous scientific tradition. No other civilization in the Americas matched this level of celestial knowledge during the same period. Maya mathematics was equally sophisticated. They developed positional notation, used the number 0 centuries before it appeared in Europe, and created calculation systems simple enough for daily accounting, yet powerful enough for astronomical modeling. Their number system was visual, dots for ones, bars for fives, shells for 0, but it contained true numerical abstraction. They could calculate enormous figures needed to predict solar events centuries ahead. The Maya writing system offered another level of intellectual power. Hieroglyphic inscriptions recorded genealogy, mythology, economics, religion, astronomy, diplomacy, and personal identity. Unlike many ancient scripts, Maya writing used both phonetic elements and logograms, allowing scribes to express full grammar, metaphor, and poetry. Carved on stele, painted on pottery, written in codices, and inscribed in palace murals, Maya texts formed an immense literary archive. Only a fraction survives today. Most codices were destroyed during Spanish conquest, but what remains demonstrates linguistic complexity rivaling Egyptian hieroglyphs. Maya architecture embodied scientific understanding. Pyramids were designed to mirror sacred mountains, representing the bridge between earth and sky. Temples aligned with solstices and equinoxes. Entire city grids were oriented to astronomical axes, reflecting cosmic beliefs. Engineering feats included multi-story palaces, massive plazas, vaulted chambers, causeways stretching miles through the forest, and hydraulic reservoirs capable of storing millions of liters of water. Modern LiDAR mapping shows that Maya cities possessed dense networks of roads and canals that linked households, neighborhoods, and farms with remarkable efficiency. Maya agricultural science also revealed astonishing sophistication. Farmers used terracing, raised fields, polyculture, composting, forest gardens, and soil renewal methods. They cultivated dozens of food crops: maize, beans, squash, chili peppers, avocado, cacao, sweet potato, tomatoes, and cotton, while maintaining stable forest ecosystems for fuel, medicine, and hunting. Maya farmers understood microclimates and soil types, guiding planting decisions through astronomical calibration. Their botanical knowledge turned the rainforest into a sustainable farm long before industrial agriculture existed. Medicine was another major intellectual achievement. Maya healers used herbal treatments, body manipulation, bloodletting, steam baths, and incense therapy to treat physical and spiritual illness. Painted murals and ceramic scenes depict healers mixing medicine in gourds while chanting ritual phrases. Archaeological evidence suggests surgical practices such as trepanation, removal of bone segments from a skull, were sometimes performed successfully. In addition to science and engineering, the Maya cultivated complex forms of storytelling, theater, and oral poetry. Their myths, such as the hero twins narrative from the Popol Vuh, contain philosophical ideas about life, death, cosmic destruction, and rebirth. Maya priests interpreted dreams, omens, and celestial signs as messages guiding rulers and farmers. Knowledge was multileveled, mixing scientific observation with ritual symbolism. What makes Maya science even more impressive is its integration with art and architecture. Temples served as observatories. Pyramid staircases doubled as calendars. Wall murals encoded star charts. Writing, mathematics, and astronomy were unified rather than separate academic fields. This interdisciplinary worldview shaped an intellectual culture unlike anything else in the Western Hemisphere. The tragedy of collapse becomes sharper when we see the height of Maya intelligence. A civilization able to predict eclipses and construct enormous stone platforms without metal tools or draft animals clearly possessed organizational power. A society that developed zero and built star-aligned cities was not culturally fragile. It was culturally extraordinary. Yet this brilliance contained its own vulnerabilities. Knowledge depended on elite education, scribal schools, and royal patronage. Astronomical records required stable priesthood. Architectural projects required strong governments, abundant food, and coordinated labor. When drought and warfare destabilized society, the institutional structures that supported Mayan knowledge faltered. Astronomers continued to observe the skies, but their audience dwindled. Scribes continued to carve texts, but monuments dried up. Scientific culture did not vanish instantly. It slowly unraveled as urban funding disappeared. To understand the Maya collapse, we must explore the intellectual stress placed upon Maya knowledge systems during the final century before major cities fell. Scientific traditions were not destroyed all at once. Instead, they strained under environmental trauma, political fragmentation, and cultural doubt. The same systems that once brought stability, astronomy, mathematics, ritual calendars, and agricultural science, began reflecting social anxiety rather than confidence. Maya knowledge was forced to evolve under pressure, and the records of this transition reveal how a great scientific tradition tried to save a collapsing world. Astronomical inscriptions from the terminal classic period show subtle but telling changes in calendrical emphasis. Earlier texts often focused on cosmic celebration, the birth of gods, the coronation of kings, milestones of Venus cycles, and mythical anniversaries. But later inscriptions reveal greater concern with drought signs, ominous dates, and references to celestial disorder. Some monuments contain inscriptions describing periods of darkness or unusual eclipses interpreted as divine warnings. Astronomers, once celebrated as interpreters of celestial harmony, became interpreters of cosmic crisis. Their insights, instead of confirming stability, now highlighted fragility. Evidence from central Petan inscriptions suggests rulers consulted astronomers more frequently as collapse deepened. These texts indicate kings relied on sky watchers to justify ritual decisions, choosing when to engage in war, when to harvest, and when to pray for rain. Astronomy, once used for ceremonial scheduling, became a political weapon. A king who wanted to raise an army could claim the stars demanded conflict. A ruler facing rebellion could cite cosmic prophecy to justify brutal punishment. The authority of science, rather than fading immediately, became distorted under the weight of fear. Yet astronomy also revealed weakness. When drought cycles began disrupting agricultural calendars, farmers struggled to align planting seasons with celestial timing. The Maya depended on precise dates to coordinate farming cycles, but the climate no longer obeyed those celestial rhythms. Priests recommended planting weeks or months earlier or later, seeking pattern in chaos. But nature refused to cooperate. For people who believed divine order matched earthly seasons, this mismatch was devastating. It ruptured the metaphysical connection between sky and soil. Agricultural knowledge, once a pillar of Maya success, struggled under environmental pressure. Farmers experimented with drought-resistant crops, changing maize varieties, planting deeper into soil, and diversifying food networks. Botanical remains from late layers show increases in cassava, amaranth, and Ramon tree nuts. These alternative crops reflect adaptation rather than ignorance. Yet shifting away from maize also meant shifting away from cultural identity. Maya mythology says humans are made from maize. To consume cassava for survival was to rewrite spiritual identity. Knowledge adaptation carried emotional cost. Mathematics endured longer than other sciences, but it too lost institutional grounding. Scribes trained in complex positional notation had fewer opportunities to apply their skills. Without monumental inscriptions or grand temple construction, mathematical expertise now served only ritual calendars and local record keeping. Astronomy required numerical precision, but astronomical institutions shrank as royal support evaporated. Knowledge lived on in memory, not stone. Writing suffered greatly. The Maya script was tied deeply to elite sponsorship and palace education. Without scribal schools, literacy faded. This fading did not indicate loss of intelligence. It reflected loss of institutions. Writing on pottery continued for a while in rural communities, but elite text stopped. Codices that once preserved astronomical tables were no longer copied. Some scholars believe last-generation scribes attempted to hide or bury books before abandoning cities, hoping future generations would rediscover them. Tragically, Spanish conquest centuries later destroyed most surviving codices, erasing the last voices of Maya scientific tradition. Architecture also reveals scientific decline. Maya construction once displayed perfect alignment with solstice points, cardinal directions, and zenith passage. But collapse-era buildings show inaccuracies, off-angle alignments indicating that knowledge was fading or no longer valued. This does not mean Maya science weakened intellectually. Rather, chaos prevented precision. Without labor, tools, or centralized planning, astronomical architecture became impossible. Still, knowledge persisted in rural communities. Farmers remembered planting cycles through oral teaching. Healers remembered herbal medicine. Storytellers preserved mythology. Astronomers continued sky watching individually, even without royal observatories. Knowledge simply decentralized. We tend to imagine collapse as death, but Maya science survived by shrinking into smaller, more intimate spaces. Culturally, the emotional pressure on knowledge was immense. When predictions failed and drought continued, faith in astronomy may have weakened. Farmers who once trusted seasonal cycles now saw the sky as unpredictable. Priests risked losing public trust. Some rulers turned to bloodier rituals to regain legitimacy. If astronomy could not deliver rain, perhaps sacrifice would. Knowledge became intertwined with desperation. There is evidence that Maya intellectuals responded creatively to crisis. Late murals show hybrid sky symbols blending Maya cosmology with new imagery, perhaps reflecting theological reinvention. Some scribes experimented with simplified writing, creating faster methods to record data. Rulers, council members, and elite warriors derived legitimacy from successful campaigns, control of strategic resources, and ritual performance. Public ceremonies often celebrated military victories, with ball games, feasts, and sacrifices marking triumphs and reinforcing authority. Captured prisoners were sometimes sacrificed or integrated into elite households, symbolizing both power and social control. These practices were not merely symbolic. They created tangible incentives for loyalty among warriors and citizens, maintaining cohesion in a complex urban society. Leaders' ability to coordinate military campaigns directly impacted their authority and the city's stability. Northern cities also developed sophisticated military diplomacy. Alliances were formed through ritual agreements, marriage, trade, and religious observances, creating networks of interdependent cities that could resist external threats collectively. Archaeological evidence shows that certain architectural motifs, ceramics, and ceremonial practices were shared among allied cities, suggesting coordinated political and military strategies. Diplomatic relationships often determine access to critical trade resources such as salt, obsidian, jade, and textiles. Cities that maintained these networks were better able to withstand both environmental stress and rival aggression, demonstrating the intersection of diplomacy, commerce, and military strategy. Raiding and offensive operations were strategic tools for resource acquisition and political assertion. Northern cities conducted targeted campaigns to secure control over agricultural areas, trade routes, or rival settlements. Unlike the southern capitals, where warfare sometimes led to widespread urban destruction, northern military operations were more focused and selective, minimizing disruption to civilian life and urban infrastructure. Archaeological evidence of destroyed outposts, weapon caches, and charred ceremonial structures indicates that raids were precise, politically motivated, and integrated with ritual commemoration rather than indiscriminate destruction. This approach preserved urban stability while asserting dominance over regional rivals. Education and training in warfare were integrated with broader social and ritual life. Young men were trained in weapon use, tactics, and leadership from early age, often under the supervision of elder warriors and ceremonial officials. Martial training was closely tied to ritual knowledge. Boys learned calendrical calculations, astronomical observation, and ceremonial etiquette alongside combat skills. This integration ensured that military competence reinforced social legitimacy and spiritual authority. Knowledge of timing, celestial patterns, and ritual observances enhanced both strategic planning and symbolic power, reflecting the inseparable nature of warfare and culture in post-classic society. Trade and warfare were mutually reinforcing. Control of trade routes provided resources necessary for military campaigns, while military success secured economic advantage. Northern cities like Chichén Itzá and Cobá controlled long Sakbiab, causeways connecting urban centers and trade hubs. Fortified checkpoints and strategic placements along these routes ensured safe passage of goods while enabling rapid mobilization of troops if needed. Archaeological evidence shows that access to salt, textiles, and ritual materials was tightly regulated, with military oversight ensuring economic stability. Control over trade enhanced political legitimacy, strengthened alliances, and facilitated urban expansion. Social life adapted to the demands of military preparedness. Neighborhood cohesion, cooperative labor, and participation in communal defense projects were essential for survival. Fortifications, cisterns, and watchtowers required regular maintenance, integrating civic responsibility with defensive readiness. Artisans contributed to military needs, producing weapons, armor, and ceremonial objects celebrating martial achievements. Religious practices reinforced military authority, as rituals often commemorated campaigns, offered protection for soldiers, and sought divine favor for strategic decisions. In this sense, warfare shaped not only urban design and political hierarchy, but also everyday routines, belief systems, and social expectations. Health, nutrition, and mobility were closely tied to warfare. Soldiers and laborers required sustenance, and urban planning ensured access to stored food, water from cenotes, and medicinal plants. Archaeological evidence shows careful management of resources to support both civilian and military populations. Seasonal campaigns were timed to coincide with agricultural cycles and ritual calendars, maximizing efficiency and minimizing risk to civilians. Communities adapted to seasonal or prolonged conflict by integrating resource management, labor allocation, and social rituals, demonstrating the intertwined nature of military strategy and urban survival. In conclusion, warfare and political struggle in northern post-classic Maya cities were complex and deeply embedded in social, economic, and ritual life. Unlike southern capitals, which often fell due to over-centralization and environmental stress, northern cities used military organization as a tool for stabilization, survival, and adaptation. Fortifications, professional armies, alliances, trade control, and integrated ritual practices allowed these cities to endure, thrive, and maintain cultural continuity. Warfare was both a practical necessity and a symbol of social order, enabling northern Maya civilization to flourish in the centuries following the collapse of the southern lowlands. Religion and ritual practice were central to the cohesion, identity, and resilience of northern post-classic Maya cities. After the collapse of southern capitals, northern centers such as Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Mayapán maintained and transformed religious traditions, adapting them to new political and environmental realities. Religion was deeply intertwined with social organization, governance, warfare, and daily life, reflecting the Maya belief that the cosmos, society, and individual existence were interconnected. Understanding post-classic religious life provides insight into how northern cities preserve cultural continuity and reinforce social cohesion despite the challenges posed by migration, environmental change, and regional competition. One of the defining features of northern post-classic religion was the central role of deities connected to cosmic and natural cycles. The feathered serpent deity Kukulkan emerged as a dominant figure, embodying both political and spiritual authority. Temples dedicated to Kukulkan, including the Pyramid of Kukulkan at Chichén Itzá, served multiple purposes. They were astronomical observatories, ceremonial centers, and symbols of political power. During equinoxes, the shadow of the pyramid created the illusion of a serpent descending the staircase, demonstrating a precise integration of astronomical knowledge, architectural skill, and religious symbolism. This interplay between observation, ritual, and spectacle reinforced elite legitimacy and strengthened the bonds between rulers, priests, and ordinary citizens. Rituals encompassed both large public ceremonies and private household practices. Public rituals often involved large gatherings at plazas and temples, where sacrifices, feasts, and performances took place. Human sacrifice, typically prisoners of war or high-status captives, was a prominent feature, reflecting the interconnectedness of military success and spiritual authority. Sacrificial acts were believed to maintain cosmic balance, appease deities, and ensure agricultural fertility. Archaeological evidence, including sacrificial caches, ceremonial knives, and altar remains, demonstrates that these practices were highly organized and ritualized, involving both elite priests and military officials. Household rituals played an equally important role in sustaining religious life. Domestic altars, often simple clay platforms or painted stone areas, contained offerings to ancestors, deities, and spirits of the natural world. Families conducted small-scale ceremonies to ensure the protection of crops, water sources, and the health of household members. These practices maintained spiritual continuity, provided psychological comfort, and reinforced social norms. Household ritual also served as a mechanism for transmitting religious knowledge across generations, as children learned ceremonial procedures, prayers, and offerings from parents and elders. Astronomy continued to play a critical role in religious practice. Priests and astronomers calculated the Tzolk'in and Hab calendars, aligning agricultural activities, festivals, and ceremonial events with celestial cycles. Observations of the sun, moon, planets, and stars guided the timing of planting, harvesting, and ritual offerings. The integration of astronomical observation into religious practice ensured that spiritual and practical life remained coordinated, reflecting the Maya worldview that cosmic order mirrored social and environmental order. Temples, pyramids, and other ceremonial structures were carefully aligned to celestial events, allowing architecture itself to serve as a medium for ritual and observation. Pilgrimage and processions were common in post-classic religious life. Communities often traveled to major temples or cenotes to perform rituals during significant calendrical events, such as solstices, equinoxes, and Venus cycles. These gatherings reinforced civic identity, strengthened alliances between neighboring cities, and allowed migrants from the south to integrate into northern religious networks. Archaeological evidence shows that offerings, including jade, pottery, food, and figurines, were deposited in sacred spaces during these events. Such practices reinforced both social cohesion and spiritual legitimacy. Ritual practices were closely tied to environmental management. Cenotes, sacred wells, and natural springs were revered as sources of water, life, and spiritual power. Offerings placed in these sites, such as pottery, jade, food, or even human remains, were believed to ensure rainfall, protect crops, and maintain harmony between humans and the natural world. The maintenance of water systems, including canals and reservoirs, was thus both a practical and a religious responsibility. Priests and community leaders oversaw these projects, reinforcing their authority while ensuring urban survival. Religious festivals also integrated economic and social functions. Markets, feasting, and trade often coincided with ceremonial events, linking spiritual activity to the redistribution of goods, labor coordination, and social interaction. Ceremonial life thus reinforced both economic stability and community solidarity. Artisans and traders participated in festivals by producing and distributing ritual objects, demonstrating how religious practice was embedded in daily economic and social activity. The continuity of oral tradition played a critical role in maintaining religious knowledge. Stories of gods, creation myths, ancestral heroes, and cosmic events were recited and reenacted during festivals, household ceremonies, and public gatherings. Oral transmission allowed Southern traditions to survive, even as monumental inscriptions decreased. Ritual knowledge, combined with astronomical observation, ensured the persistence of a coherent worldview despite demographic shifts and urban reorganization. Education and initiation into religious life were integral to maintaining continuity. Young members of elite and non-elite households learned ceremonial roles, calendrical calculation, and ritual etiquette. Apprenticeship with priests and elders ensured the survival of astronomical, ritual, and cosmological knowledge. Even as southern scribal schools were abandoned, northern communities preserved intellectual traditions through teaching, ritual, and community practice. In conclusion, religion and ritual in northern post-classic Maya cities were central to social cohesion, environmental management, and political legitimacy. Ceremonial structures, sacred sites, household altars, and public festivals provided continuity, identity, and resilience in a period marked by migration, environmental stress, and political realignment. By integrating spiritual, practical, and social elements, northern Maya cities maintained both cultural memory and civic stability, demonstrating that religion was not merely belief, but a vital organizing principle in post-classic urban life. In post-classic northern Maya cities, religion was not an isolated sphere, but a fundamental organizing principle that shaped social, economic, and political life. Ritual practice extended beyond formal temple ceremonies to influence everyday routines, urban planning, and communal governance. In cities like Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Mayapán, ceremonial life reinforced social hierarchy while providing mechanisms for cohesion, conflict resolution, and continuity of cultural identity. The interplay of ritual, architecture, and social life allowed northern Maya cities to maintain stability and integrate southern migrants, who brought their own religious traditions, skills, and knowledge into the northern cultural milieu. Unlike the southern capitals, which were highly centralized and dependent on dynastic kingship, the northern cities experimented with more flexible governance structures, allowing them to survive environmental stress and maintain cultural cohesion even as southern models failed. Councils of nobles, shared rulership, and semi-autonomous districts replaced absolute dynastic authority. These adaptations reveal lessons learned from the collapse of Tikal, Cobá, and other southern centers. The North demonstrates that political innovation was as crucial to survival as geography or water access. Chichén Itzá illustrates the complexity of northern governance. While rulers continued to perform sacred rituals and maintain ceremonial authority, major administrative tasks were distributed among a council of officials. Military leadership, trade management, water allocation, and temple oversight became more specialized and less centralized. This distributed authority prevented single points of failure that had contributed to the rapid downfall of southern capitals. Archaeological evidence of palatial compounds, large administrative buildings, and plazas with multifunctional spaces supports the idea that the city was organized to balance ritual, political, and commercial functions simultaneously. Northern cities also benefited from the integration of southern refugee populations. As the drought and political breakdown devastated the southern lowlands, artisans, scribes, and farmers migrated northward. These migrants brought with them knowledge of architecture, ceramics, mathematics, astronomy, and ritual practices. Archaeological findings show that northern cities incorporated southern architectural styles, such as corbelled vault construction, ceremonial ball court designs, and pyramid layouts. At the same time, these traditions were blended with new innovations influenced by the Toltec culture from central Mexico. The result was a hybrid culture that maintained Maya identity while introducing new methods of organization, aesthetics, and religious expression. Water management in the north was also a key factor in sustaining population and political stability. While southern cities relied heavily on artificial reservoirs that failed under drought conditions, northern cities developed strategies that maximized the reliability of cenotes. Some cities engineered canals and cisterns to store rainfall efficiently. Others created terraced fields that diverted excess water during wet periods to dry reservoirs, creating a buffer against seasonal variability. This careful management allowed large urban populations to survive, unlike the southern lowlands where failed water systems accelerated depopulation. Archaeological surveys reveal carefully planned water channels, cistern networks, and ritual offerings deposited near cenotes, indicating that water was both a practical and sacred resource. Trade in the northern Maya world also shifted significantly. With southern trade networks disrupted or abandoned, the north became the primary hub for long-distance commerce. Cities like Chichén Itzá controlled routes connecting the interior peninsula to coastal ports, facilitating the transport of salt, cacao, obsidian, jade, copper bells, cotton, and feathers. Maritime trade along the Caribbean coast complemented inland caravan routes, increasing economic resilience. Evidence of trade includes standardized weights, stone markers, ceramic inventories, and imported artifacts, demonstrating a sophisticated and robust commercial system. The economic strength of northern cities allowed them to flourish despite continuing environmental stress and political turbulence. Religion in northern cities adapted in response to post-collapse conditions. The cult of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent deity, became central to northern identity, symbolizing power, protection, and cosmic order. While southern cities emphasized dynastic divinity and royal authority, northern religious practices emphasized collective rituals and public ceremonies. The Temple of the Warriors, with its massive colonnaded halls, served both ritual and civic functions, demonstrating how religious architecture reinforced social cohesion. Public rituals, including ball games, sacrifices, and astronomical ceremonies, maintained legitimacy while simultaneously integrating displaced southern populations into a shared cultural framework. Military organization in the north also evolved in response to lessons from the collapse. Unlike southern armies that were heavily reliant on dynastic loyalty and individual ruler command, northern cities developed professionalized warrior classes with independent authority, capable of defending trade routes, city borders, and water sources. Weapon caches, fortifications, and skeletal trauma evidence indicate that conflict remained part of society, but northern cities were better prepared to absorb shocks without catastrophic collapse. Warfare became more organized, structured, and integrated into city governance rather than destabilizing the entire political system. Culturally, northern cities maintained the intellectual traditions of a Maya while innovating. Astronomy continued, though with different emphases reflecting local environmental and political conditions. Calendrical knowledge was preserved, but the focus shifted from royal dynastic events to public rituals and agricultural timing. Literacy survived in codices, ceramics, and murals, though likely practiced by fewer specialists. Mathematics continued to underpin architecture and ritual planning, showing continuity with classic Southern practices. Even oral storytelling flourished, preserving mythology and history among both elite and commoner populations. Northern Maya cities were also centers of artistic innovation. Puuc architectural style emerged prominently in Uxmal, featuring intricate mosaics, stone masks, latticework, and columned palaces. Chichén Itzá, while influenced by Toltec motifs, retained Maya astronomical alignment and iconography. Art, architecture, and ritual fused to create cities that were both politically stable and culturally rich. Even under new social structures and environmental pressures, these northern centers demonstrated resilience and creativity that allowed the Maya civilization to survive and thrive in the post-classic period. Population density in northern cities increased compared to southern lowlands, reflecting both migration from the south and local demographic growth. LiDAR surveys reveal expansive urban layouts, suggesting tens of thousands of residents in interconnected neighborhoods, supported by carefully managed agricultural and water systems. The North became the political, economic, and spiritual heart of the Maya world for centuries following Southern abandonment. Ultimately, the rise of Northern Maya power demonstrates that collapse in one region does not equate to the end of civilization. By learning from past failures, adapting governance, protecting water and food systems, integrating refugee populations, and sustaining cultural and intellectual traditions, northern cities rebuilt Maya civilization. This transition illustrates resilience, innovation, and adaptability, showing that the Maya were not victims of collapse, but active participants in reconstructing their world. Northern Maya power marks a critical period in the human story, a civilization that absorbed catastrophe, restructured governance, preserved knowledge, and created a new cultural epicenter. From the ruins of the southern capitals, the Maya civilization endured, albeit in a transformed geographic and political landscape. The rise of Northern Maya power after the collapse of the southern lowlands represents more than a geographic shift. It reflects a profound transformation in social organization, cultural practice, and long-term survival strategy. Northern cities not only absorbed population and knowledge from the south, but also adapted traditions, technologies, and religious practices to fit a new environmental and political context. This period, often referred to as the Postclassic, demonstrates the resilience and adaptability of Maya civilization in the face of systemic failure. Chichén Itzá, as the dominant northern city, became a hub of innovation. Its growth was fueled by migration from southern cities such as Tikal, Copan, and Caracol. Archaeological evidence suggests that skilled artisans, architects, and scribes from the south contributed significantly to northern construction projects, religious monuments, and artistic production. The city's layout incorporated advanced knowledge of urban planning, water management, and ceremonial design. Cenotes provided reliable water for both domestic use and ritual purposes, creating a sustainable foundation for a dense urban population. Northern political systems also differed from the highly centralized dynastic rule of the South. Instead of relying solely on divine kingship, northern cities implemented councils of nobles, warrior leaders, and religious authorities who shared governance responsibilities. This decentralization reduced the risk of total collapse if a single ruler failed, a problem that had plagued southern capitals during periods of drought and internal rebellion. Evidence of public spaces, administrative buildings, and fortified neighborhoods indicates a balance between civic governance, religious oversight, and military organization. Shared authority allowed northern cities to maintain stability despite environmental and social stress. The religious landscape in northern cities evolved in response to both migration and crisis. While southern cities emphasized the divine authority of kings, northern cities promoted more communal and integrative religious practices. The cult of Kukulkan, the feathered serpent, became central, symbolizing both spiritual and political continuity. Massive temples, such as the Pyramid of Kukulkan, were aligned to the equinox, reflecting astronomical knowledge inherited from southern traditions but adapted for northern cosmology. Religious rituals were not only for elite display. They integrated citizens from multiple backgrounds, including migrant from the south, reinforcing social cohesion and identity. Trade networks expanded dramatically in northern cities. Chichén Itzá and Uxmal became primary hubs for commerce, connecting inland production with coastal markets. Salt, cacao, cotton, obsidian, jade, feathers, and copper bells flowed through these urban centers. Archaeological findings, including standardized weights, trade goods, and imported artifacts, suggest a sophisticated commercial system that rivaled pre-collapse southern trade networks. Maritime trade along the Caribbean and Gulf coasts further strengthened northern cities, providing resilience against local agricultural failures. Art and architecture in the north also illustrate adaptation and innovation. Puke-style mosaics in Uxmal display highly intricate geometric and symbolic designs, while Chichén Itzá's architecture integrates Toltec influence with traditional Maya elements. Stone columns, colonnaded halls, and decorated facades suggest that northern elites invested in public visibility to reinforce authority and cultural identity. Murals and carved monuments convey both continuity with classic Southern traditions and responsiveness to the demands of a new political and social environment. Northern urban planning prioritized resilience. Archaeological surveys using LiDAR technology reveal extensive sakbiab connecting distant neighborhoods, ceremonial centers, and outlying settlements. These elevated limestone roads facilitated trade, communication, and military movement. Residences were organized around plazas and ceremonial areas, ensuring both social cohesion and defensibility. Fortifications suggest awareness of potential conflict, though northern warfare was often more strategic and less destructive than the catastrophic conflicts of southern capitals. Cultural continuity in the north was maintained through oral and ritual traditions. Even as monumental inscriptions became less frequent, knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and calendrical cycles persisted. Priests, elders, and scribes transmitted skills and cosmological knowledge through apprenticeship and ceremony, ensuring that the intellectual foundations of Maya civilization survived. Calendrical calculations guided agriculture, religious observances, and social events, integrating scientific knowledge into everyday life. The northern cities also absorbed technological knowledge from southern migrants. Skilled masons, potters, and weavers contributed techniques and designs developed over centuries in southern capitals. Agricultural innovations, such as terrace farming and soil management, were adapted for the northern environment. Ritual practices, architectural symbolism, and astronomical observation methods were preserved and modified, reflecting both continuity and creative adaptation. One of the most important legacies of northern expansion was the creation of a more flexible and sustainable urban system. Unlike the southern lowlands, which depended heavily on large-scale agricultural infrastructure and centralized political authority, northern cities were capable of absorbing population fluctuations, environmental stress, and political challenges. By balancing centralized and distributed governance, integrating southern knowledge, and adapting religious and economic practices, northern Maya centers ensured survival in a world reshaped by collapse. Ultimately, the rise of northern Maya power shows that collapse is not always final. While southern capitals were abandoned and southern dynasties fell, Maya civilization endured, relocated, and transformed. The north became the new epicenter of political authority, economic innovation, and cultural creativity. It preserved astronomical and calendrical knowledge, protected art and architecture, maintained religious continuity, and integrated migrant populations, ensuring that the Maya legacy would survive for centuries. The northern Maya cities of the post-classic period, including Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Mayapán, were not merely centers of political power and religious innovation. They were living, breathing urban spaces filled with the everyday struggles and triumphs of ordinary people. Understanding daily life in these cities reveals the resilience of Maya society after the collapse of the southern capitals, showing how communities adapted their routines, maintained social cohesion, and balanced survival with ritual, commerce, and cultural expression. Archaeological evidence, ethno-historical records, and comparative studies paint a vivid picture of the social fabric of northern Maya cities during this transformative period. One of the most critical aspects of post-classic social life was food production and distribution. Northern cities lacked the abundant rivers and lakes of the southern lowlands, so residents relied on a combination of cenotes, seasonal rainfall, terraced fields, and milpa systems to sustain themselves. Farmers practiced intercropping, growing maize alongside beans, squash, and chili peppers to maintain soil fertility and reduce the risk of crop failure. Public rituals were central to urban cohesion and political authority. Plazas, ball courts, and pyramidal temples served as stages for large-scale ceremonies, often linked to agricultural cycles or celestial events. Festivals were timed according to the Chichén and Hob calendars, integrating religious observance with practical management of planting and harvesting. The ball game, which held both ritual and political significance, was performed as a ceremonial event that reinforced social hierarchy, celebrated martial prowess, and symbolically reenacted cosmic themes of life, death, and renewal. Archaeological evidence, including ceremonial caches, painted murals, and carved stelae, suggests that these events were meticulously coordinated and highly visible, engaging entire communities in ritualized expression and civic participation. Sacrificial practices, though controversial today, played a critical role in reinforcing authority and ensuring cosmic balance. Captives from warfare, prisoners of high status, or symbolic representations were offered to deities such as Kukulkan or Chak, the rain god, to guarantee rainfall, agricultural fertility, or political legitimacy. Archaeological findings, including sacrificial altars, offerings, and human remains in cenotes, illustrate that such acts were ritualized and socially significant. Sacrifice functioned as both a spiritual offering and a demonstration of political power, signaling to allies, rivals, and citizens that the city maintained divine favor and social cohesion. Household rituals complemented public ceremonies. Domestic altars were ubiquitous, containing small figurines, pottery, incense, and food offerings. Families maintained these private rituals to protect crops, children, and health, linking individual survival to spiritual observance. Some families incorporated Ramon tree nuts, wild fruits, and forest roots into their diets, reflecting an adaptive approach to scarcity. Large urban centers depended on these small-scale agricultural techniques, which were coordinated with ritual calendars to maximize efficiency and spiritual alignment. Daily work in the fields was intimately tied to cosmic observation, as planning schedules were often determined by the Tzolk'in and solar cycles. Markets were another essential element of social life. Archaeological surveys indicate that post-classic northern cities hosted regular marketplaces where farmers, artisans, and traders exchanged goods. Market spaces were often located in public plazas, near temples, or along major sakbiab, stone causeways, making them accessible to both urban and suburban residents. Goods sold included maize, beans, cacao, textiles, salt, obsidian tools, pottery, feathers, and ritual items. These marketplaces functioned not only as economic hubs, but also as centers for social interaction, news exchange, and cultural reinforcement. Merchants played a critical role in maintaining the flow of goods and knowledge, linking cities to coastal and inland trade networks. The presence of imported goods, copper bells from Veracruz, jade from Highland Guatemala, and marine shells from the Caribbean, indicates the scale and sophistication of northern post-classic trade. Housing structures reflect daily survival strategies and social organization. Commoner residences were typically small, single-room homes with thatched roofs and walls constructed from stone, adobe, or wattle and daub. Floors often contained hearths for cooking, storage pits for maize and beans, and small altars for domestic ritual. Wealthier families resided in multi-room compounds, sometimes with courtyards, ceremonial platforms, and storage facilities for luxury goods. Archaeological evidence shows that homes were clustered into neighborhoods with shared resources, demonstrating cooperative strategies for defense, food distribution, and ritual practice. Even ordinary households incorporated symbolic elements, such as painted walls or carved wooden objects, highlighting the integration of spirituality into daily life. Water management was central to survival and social stability. Cenotes were carefully maintained for drinking, ritual, and agricultural irrigation. In some cities, ritual offerings, jewelry, pottery, and human figurines were deposited in cenotes, blending spiritual and practical utility. Water access often determined neighborhood hierarchies, with families near cenotes having advantages in agriculture, hygiene, and trade. Ingeniously, some communities constructed cisterns and aqueducts to collect and store rainfall, reducing reliance on natural wells and creating redundancy in case of seasonal variation or drought. These strategies illustrate the combination of environmental knowledge and social cooperation that characterized Northern Maya urban life. Artisan activity played a significant role in daily existence and economic survival. Potters, weavers, stone carvers, and metalworkers produced functional and ceremonial goods. Pottery included cooking vessels, storage jars, drinking cups, and ritual ceramics decorated with geometric and iconographic designs. Weaving used cotton threads to produce clothing, ceremonial textiles, and trade items. Stone carvers created stele, temple reliefs, and household figurines. Metalworkers crafted copper bells and other ritual instruments, often integrating imported materials. Artisans worked both for subsistence and for ritual and trade purposes, reflecting the dual economic and cultural roles of craft production. Ritual remained central to daily life. While large-scale public ceremonies were important, smaller household rituals persisted even among commoners. Families maintained domestic altars, performed offerings to ancestors, celebrated solstices, and observed key soak-in dates. These practices provided continuity and identity, connecting post-collapse communities to the memory of Southern traditions. Ritual acted as social glue, reinforcing family, neighborhood, and city identity. Even in times of scarcity, households prioritized offerings, emphasizing the integration of survival and spirituality. Education and knowledge transmission occurred primarily within families and guilds. Children learned farming techniques, craft skills, and ritual observances from parents and community elders. Astronomical and calendrical knowledge, previously concentrated among elite scribes, filtered down through apprenticeships and oral instruction. Literacy persisted in simplified forms on ceramics and small codices, preserving essential aspects of Maya culture even without large-scale stele inscriptions. Knowledge was adapted to local needs, emphasizing practical application over monumental display. Health and medicine were critical daily concerns. Archaeological evidence shows that herbal treatments, bone setting, and ritual healing remained in use. Families stored medicinal plants and performed therapeutic ceremonies in response to injury, disease, and spiritual imbalance. Chronic malnutrition and infection, likely legacies of Southern collapse, were mitigated through adaptive agricultural practices, foraging, and communal care networks. Household health strategies reveal the intersection of practical knowledge and spiritual belief in maintaining community resilience. Social interaction and entertainment were also vital for psychological survival. Ball courts, plazas, and ceremonial halls hosted games, performances, storytelling, and feasting. These activities reinforced civic identity, provided outlets for tension, and maintained links to cultural tradition. Public festivals coordinated with calendrical cycles strengthened cohesion, reminding residents of shared history and reinforcing community legitimacy. Even minor events, such as neighborhood celebrations, connected ordinary citizens to broader cultural rhythms. In summary, daily life in northern post-classic cities was an intricate balance of survival, ritual, trade, and social cohesion. Residents managed environmental challenges through innovative agriculture, water management, and communal organization. They preserved cultural identity through art, ritual, and knowledge transmission. They maintained trade networks, marketplaces, and craft production to sustain both economy and social relationships. Northern Maya society demonstrates that resilience after collapse required integrating science, tradition, cooperation, and adaptation into every aspect of life, from household routines to citywide administration. In addition to food production, trade, and domestic routines, social life in northern post-classic Maya cities was shaped by migration patterns, community integration, and adaptation to environmental constraints. The collapse of southern capitals had forced thousands of people to relocate, and northern cities like Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Mayapán absorbed these newcomers. Migrants carried specialized skills in pottery, weaving, masonry, astronomy, and ritual knowledge, while also maintaining cultural and familial traditions. The integration of diverse populations created dynamic neighborhoods, blending local northern customs with southern intellectual and artistic heritage. Archaeological evidence shows that imported ceramics, hybrid architectural styles, and ritual artifacts appeared in neighborhoods where migrant populations settled, demonstrating cultural transmission and adaptation. Household organization reflected both practical and symbolic needs. Residences typically included a main living space with thatched roofs, domestic altars, hearths, and storage pits. The size and complexity of homes varied with social status, reflecting economic hierarchy and access to resources. Artifacts within homes reveal that even ordinary families participated in ritual life. Small figurines, painted ceramics, miniature stelae, and offerings to ancestors were common. These domestic rituals served multiple purposes: spiritual protection, social continuity, and reinforcement of local and family identity. Maintaining household religious practices ensured cultural stability in a world where centralized royal authority had been restructured. Labor and economic production were deeply intertwined with social organization. Men and women performed complementary roles to maintain household survival, craft production, and community infrastructure. Men often engaged in field work, water management, construction, and trade, while women specialized in weaving, pottery, food preparation, and domestic ritual. Children learned essential skills from early age, participating in household tasks and apprenticeships that ensured generational knowledge transfer. This division of labor allowed communities to maximize efficiency, support urban populations, and maintain cultural continuity despite environmental and political stresses. Markets were not just economic centers, but social and cultural hubs. Archaeological surveys of northern plazas reveal traces of market stalls, standardized weights, and imported goods, including obsidian, jade, salt, copper bells, textiles, and exotic feathers. Markets served as venues for exchange of not only goods, but also knowledge and social connection. Farmers, artisans, traders, and migrant families could maintain networks of mutual support, reinforcing community cohesion. Public spaces hosted informal gatherings, storytelling, and ritual performances, integrating commerce with social and religious life. Food security remained a central concern for urban populations. Northern communities relied on adaptive agriculture that combined milpa systems, terrace farming, and strategic use of cenote water. Crops were selected for resilience. Maize remained central, but was supplemented with beans, squash, chili, ramon tree nuts, cassava, and wild forest plants. Archaeological remains indicate careful planning of planting schedules, storage facilities, and preservation methods to survive seasonal variability and environmental stress. Community cooperation was essential for irrigation, crop rotation, and soil maintenance. Without coordinated labor, northern cities would have been vulnerable to the same environmental pressures that destroyed southern capitals. Water management was intricately tied to ritual practice. Cenotes were sacred as well as practical, providing drinking water and irrigation. Archaeologists have found offerings deposited in cenotes, including pottery, jade, figurines, and sometimes human remains. These offerings symbolized gratitude, spiritual appeal for rain, and reinforcement of social and political legitimacy. Public rituals surrounding cenotes fostered communal solidarity, ensuring that resources were managed collectively and religious cohesion was maintained. Craft production was both economic and symbolic. Pottery workshops produced cooking vessels, storage jars, ceremonial bowls, and painted ceramics with iconography reflecting both Southern traditions and local innovation. Stone carving, architectural detailing, and metalworking continued to thrive, particularly as northern cities became regional hubs for trade and ritual display. Artisan guilds were integrated into community life, transmitting knowledge to apprentices and reinforcing familial and neighborhood networks. Craft production allowed families to sustain themselves economically while maintaining cultural expression and social prestige. Ritual and ceremonial life permeated daily survival. Large-scale events, such as solstice observances, ball games, and sacrificial ceremonies, integrated religion with civic order. Smaller, household-level rituals ensured spiritual protection and family cohesion. The calendars, including Sokin and Hob, guided planting cycles, festivals, and ceremonial dates. Astronomical knowledge remained embedded in ritual life, illustrating continuity from classic Southern traditions to Northern Postclassic practice. Observation of the sky dictated both practical and ceremonial decisions, maintaining the link between science and social order. Health and medicine were managed at the household and community levels. Archaeological evidence of medicinal plants, herbal treatments, and ritual cleansing practices shows continuity in practical and spiritual approaches to well-being. Families prepared remedies for injury, disease, and stress, while shamans and healers conducted ceremonies to maintain cosmic and bodily balance. Physical remains indicate ongoing nutritional stress, but also adaptive strategies that mitigated environmental challenges. Communities developed informal support networks to care for children, the elderly, and the sick, reinforcing social cohesion and survival capacity. Education and knowledge transmission were highly localized. While elite scribes and ritual specialists existed, much learning occurred within families and guilds. Children were trained in agricultural, artisanal, and ritual skills from an early age. Astronomical observation, calendrical calculations, and ritual literacy were taught orally and through apprenticeship, ensuring cultural continuity despite the absence of large-scale royal institutions. Knowledge was adapted to local conditions, emphasizing practical utility and survival over ceremonial grandeur. Social networks, festivals, and neighborhood cooperation were critical to urban stability. Public plazas and ball courts served as gathering points for collective labor, communal decision-making, trade, and entertainment. Festivals integrated performance, ritual, and competition, reinforcing social hierarchy while providing psychological relief. Participation in community events strengthened bonds among families, migrants, and artisans, creating resilience against external pressures such as drought, disease, or conflict. In conclusion, Daily life and social survival in northern post-classic Maya cities were characterized by a complex interplay of adaptation, cooperation, ritual practice, and economic strategy. Communities integrated southern refugees, managed environmental challenges, maintained craft production, preserved intellectual knowledge, and conducted rituals that reinforced both spiritual and social order. These adaptive strategies allowed Northern Maya civilization to flourish in a world reshaped by the collapse of southern capitals. The social fabric of northern post-classic Maya cities was not only adaptive, but also resilient in the face of both environmental and political challenges. As southern refugees integrated into these northern centers, social life became a negotiation between local traditions and the cultural practices brought by migrants. Neighborhoods were often organized around kinship, craft specialization, or occupation, fostering cohesion and interdependence. Families shared responsibilities for agriculture, water management, construction, and ritual activities, reinforcing the communal bonds that ensured survival. The post-classic Maya did not simply replicate southern institutions. They restructured social organization to optimize cooperation and maintain urban stability. Markets were vital centers for both material and social exchange. Archaeological studies of northern plazas indicate that market spaces were highly organized, with designated areas for pottery, food, textiles, tools, and luxury goods. Markets were not only venues for commerce, but also for social networking, information sharing, and cultural transmission. Merchants facilitated contact between distant regions, distributing goods such as obsidian from highland Guatemala, copper bells from Veracruz, salt from coastal deposits, and marine shells from the Caribbean. The continued movement of commodities allowed cities to maintain economic vitality despite the environmental and social stressors that had destabilized the southern lowlands. Markets also served as informal education centers, where apprentices and young traders learned the skills of negotiation, valuation, and cross-cultural interaction, maintaining economic knowledge across generations. Domestic life centered on a combination of subsistence, ritual, and craft production. Households typically included a main living space with a hearth, storage pits, and a domestic altar for offerings. Food preparation relied on maize, beans, squash, and a variety of supplemental plants including wild tubers, ramon nuts, and fruits. Archaeological residue analysis of cooking vessels reveals that households continued to consume traditional maize-based meals, while supplementing diets with alternative food sources to withstand environmental variability. Storage pits and clay jars ensured that families could survive seasonal shortages, while community granaries provided a buffer against localized crop failures. Water access through cenotes and constructed cisterns allowed households to manage hydration, irrigation, and ritual requirements simultaneously, demonstrating an integration of practical engineering and daily survival. Craft production remained central to urban social and economic life. Pottery workshops produced utilitarian and ceremonial vessels, decorated with symbolic imagery that reflected both local northern traditions and southern influences brought by migrants. Stone carving and masonry projects contributed to architectural maintenance and ritual sites, while weaving and textile production supported both domestic needs and regional trade. Artisans often worked in guilds, transmitting technical knowledge to apprentices and integrating craft production into the social structure of neighborhoods. Art and craft were not solely aesthetic. They were functional, economic, and deeply symbolic, maintaining cultural identity even as political and environmental circumstances shifted. Education and cultural transmission occurred primarily through household and guild structures. Children learned farming, craft production, ritual practices, and calendrical calculations through apprenticeship and observation. Knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and ritual observance, once concentrated in elite institutions, was diffused throughout communities, preserving core cultural competencies. Oral traditions reinforced historical memory, genealogical knowledge, and moral instruction, ensuring continuity despite the absence of centralized elite control. The integration of migrants brought additional knowledge, blending Southern and Northern traditions into a dynamic cultural repertoire that enhanced resilience. Ritual life remained a cornerstone of community stability. Household altars and public ceremonial sites maintained spiritual order, reinforced social hierarchies, and offered avenues for communal participation. Public festivals, ball games, and ritual observances synchronized with the Sokin and Hob calendars provided both social cohesion and psychological relief. These household practices reinforced intergenerational knowledge, ensuring continuity of belief systems and ritual techniques, even as elite-sponsored monumental ceremonies shifted or declined. Household rituals also integrated Southern migrant practices with Northern traditions, creating a blended religious identity that maintained cultural memory while fostering adaptation to new urban and environmental contexts. Cenotes and natural water sources were critical to both spiritual and practical life. They were regarded as portals to the underworld, connecting humans to deities and ancestors. Offerings placed in cenotes, ranging from pottery and jade to human remains, were believed to influence rainfall, crop productivity, and cosmic balance. Water management infrastructure, including reservoirs and cisterns, was intertwined with ritual practice, demonstrating that Northern Maya society integrated technical, environmental, and spiritual knowledge to ensure survival. The sanctity of water reinforced communal responsibility and authority, as religious leaders coordinated both ritual and practical water management. Astronomy remained deeply embedded in post-classic religious life. Celestial observation guided ritual timing, agricultural cycles, and public ceremonies. Temples and pyramids were aligned with solstices, equinoxes, and significant planetary movements, enabling priests and astronomers to predict celestial events with precision. Observing Venus, the Sun, and lunar phases informed ceremonial calendars and strategic decision-making, demonstrating that science and spirituality were inseparable in Maya thought. Astronomy reinforced elite authority while maintaining community cohesion through shared ritual observance of cosmic cycles. Migration significantly shaped Northern religious practice. Southern refugees carried their own ritual knowledge, deity worship, and ceremonial techniques, which were integrated into Northern city practices. Ceremonial spaces functioned as sites for negotiation, celebration, and dispute resolution, demonstrating that ritual life was embedded in everyday governance and social practice. Even minor household rituals ensured spiritual continuity, linking individual survival with community well-being. Health and medicine were vital to daily survival. Archaeological evidence shows continued use of medicinal plants, herbal remedies, and ritual healing practices. Households stored plants and other remedies to treat injury, infection, and malnutrition. Shamans and healers performed rituals to address spiritual imbalance and illness, integrating practical care with belief systems. Skeletal remains indicate adaptive strategies to manage malnutrition, infection, and physical injury, revealing a society capable of mitigating the physical consequences of environmental and social stress. Social interaction extended beyond household and market spaces. Plazas, ball courts, and public buildings served as centers for games, storytelling, negotiation, and civic engagement. Festivals reinforced neighborhood networks and broader civic cohesion, connecting ordinary citizens to the shared cosmology and cultural identity of the Northern Maya. Participation in these communal activities strengthened social bonds and provided mechanisms for cooperation, conflict resolution, and collective action. In essence, Northern Postclassic Maya cities were highly adaptive ecosystems of human activity. Residents managed environmental challenges through agriculture, water control, and resource sharing networks. They maintained economic vitality through trade, craft production, and marketplaces. They preserved intellectual and ritual knowledge through apprenticeship, oral tradition, and household practices. And they fostered social cohesion through neighborhood networks, public ceremonies, and communal rituals. The survival strategies of northern Maya cities demonstrate that resilience depended on the integration of multiple systems: environmental management, economic organization, cultural continuity, and social cooperation. Unlike the southern capitals, which collapsed under environmental, political, and social strain, northern cities leveraged migration, decentralized governance, and adaptive urban planning to maintain continuity and cultural identity. Daily life in these cities illustrates that post-collapse survival was not merely a struggle against scarcity. It was an active reconstruction of society, preserving traditions while innovating to meet new challenges. Warfare and political struggle were central aspects of life in post-classic northern Maya cities, shaping social structures, urban design, and regional interactions. Unlike the classic southern capitals, where warfare often revolved around dynastic rivalry and divine kingship, post-classic cities developed complex military strategies, fortified architecture, and political alliances to maintain power and protect resources in a fragmented landscape. Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, Cobá, and Mayapán provide rich archaeological evidence for these adaptations, revealing how warfare intertwined with social life, trade, and ritual practice. Understanding military organization in these cities allows us to appreciate how the Maya continued to wield strategic power after the collapse of southern lowlands. Northern post-classic warfare was characterized by a combination of professionalized armies, fortified urban centers, and strategic control of trade routes. Unlike southern armies, which relied heavily on dynastic obligation and temporary levies, northern cities maintained standing warrior classes organized under a hierarchy of captains, nobles, and specialized units. Weapons included atlatls, obsidian-bladed swords, spears, and slings, as well as defensive armor and shields. Excavations at fortified structures reveal strategically placed ramparts, watchtowers, and defensive walls designed to protect key civic areas and control access to water sources, marketplaces, and religious centers. These fortifications suggest an understanding of siege warfare, city defense, and tactical positioning that allowed northern cities to thrive even in politically fragmented conditions. The role of alliances was critical to post-classic military strategy. Cities frequently formed coalitions with neighboring settlements to secure trade networks, reinforce military strength, and maintain political legitimacy. Diplomatic marriages, ritual observances, and shared defense pacts helped northern cities maintain cohesion and prevent total dominance by a single rival. Archaeological evidence of shared architectural styles, co-located ceremonial structures, and imported artifacts indicates that alliances were maintained through a combination of symbolic gestures and practical arrangements. These alliances were fluid, and cities could rapidly shift allegiances based on environmental or political pressures, demonstrating a flexible approach to maintaining power in an uncertain world. Raiding and conquest were integral to post-classic political dynamics. While northern cities maintained standing armies, they also conducted raids on neighboring territories to secure resources such as food, labor, jade, obsidian, and ceremonial items. Ballgame courts, plazas, and large ceremonial centers often commemorated victories through inscriptions, murals, and relief carvings, reflecting both military and ritual dimensions of conquest. Unlike southern warfare, which sometimes culminated in catastrophic citywide destruction, northern conflict appeared to have been more targeted, often focusing on securing control of strategic resources and asserting dominance without destabilizing the entire city. The political role of warfare extended beyond defense and resource acquisition. Leaders used military power to legitimize authority and reinforce social hierarchy. Victories were commemorated with public rituals, including feasting, sacrifice, and ceremonial display, reinforcing the perception of divine sanction and maintaining civic cohesion. Captured prisoners were sometimes incorporated into ritual practice, including sacrifice, servitude, or integration into elite households. These practices reinforced the centrality of the ruler and warrior class, demonstrating that military success was both practical and symbolic. Fortifications and urban design reflected these military priorities. Archaeological surveys reveal that northern cities strategically placed watchtowers on elevated terrain, built multiple layers of defensive walls, and maintained restricted entry points to plazas and ceremonial centers. Residential neighborhoods were often arranged with defensible streets and interconnected courtyards, enabling collective defense. Observation points overlooking cenotes or trade corridors allowed early detection of potential threats, illustrating the integration of environmental knowledge into urban planning. The interplay between trade, warfare, and political stability was particularly important. Northern cities relied on commerce for sustenance, ritual wealth, and economic prestige. Controlling trade routes often meant controlling military pathways, as access to salt, cacao, textiles, and obsidian was critical for urban survival. Cities that lost control of trade networks faced both material scarcity and diminished political legitimacy. Archaeological evidence, including markers of trade regulation and fortified trade posts, suggests that warfare was closely tied to economic control. Post-classic Maya warfare also demonstrates technological adaptation. Stone weapons continued to dominate, but metallurgy, particularly copper bells and ornaments, played ceremonial and practical roles. Defensive architecture evolved to meet the demands of larger urban populations, while offensive tactics incorporated coordination across multiple neighborhoods and allied settlements. Fortified causeways and restricted access points demonstrate strategic planning intended to mitigate the impact of external raids while maintaining internal connectivity. Social consequences of warfare were profound. Commoners were mobilized for labor-intensive tasks, including construction of walls, canals, and temples that also served defensive purposes. Ritual and military life were intertwined. Ceremonies often coincided with military campaigns or commemorated victories, reinforcing the integration of civic, religious, and martial life. Education included training in military tactics, weapon use, and logistical coordination, ensuring continuity of knowledge across generations. Children observed ritualized combat demonstrations and learned survival strategies within household and neighborhood contexts. Northern cities also managed political competition internally. Elite factions often competed for control over military resources, ceremonial authority, and trade access. Council governance allowed competing factions to balance power while avoiding the catastrophic collapse seen in southern capitals. Public works, such as ball courts, plazas, and fortifications, were often joint projects, reflecting negotiation between elites to maintain urban cohesion. Conflict was managed through a combination of ritual, diplomacy, and military preparedness rather than absolute reliance on dynastic authority. Ultimately, warfare in northern post-classic Maya cities was multidimensional. It served to secure resources, defend urban centers, maintain trade routes, reinforce political legitimacy, and preserve cultural identity. Unlike the southern capitals, which often collapsed under combined pressures of environmental stress and centralized authority, northern cities used warfare as an instrument of stabilization and adaptation. Strategic military organization, combined with decentralized governance, integrated ritual practices, and adaptive urban design, allowed these cities not only to survive, but to flourish in the centuries following the southern collapse. The Northern Postclassic Maya cities were dynamic centers where warfare, political authority, and social organization were deeply intertwined. Unlike the classic southern capitals, which often relied on the divine authority of kings and centralized dynasties, northern cities implemented more complex governance structures that allowed power to be distributed among councils, military leaders, and ritual elites. This decentralized system provided resilience, preventing the catastrophic collapse experienced by southern centers and allowing cities like Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, and Mayapán to thrive despite ongoing environmental stress and political competition. Fortifications were a crucial component of urban defense. Northern cities were strategically designed to anticipate and repel attacks. Archaeological evidence shows defensive walls surrounding plazas, elevated watchtowers, restricted entry points, and defensive residential neighborhoods. Many of these fortifications were reinforced with large stone blocks and aligned along key topographic features to maximize visibility and control over surrounding land. Some cities incorporated moats, causeways, and terraces into their defensive systems. These structures suggest that warfare was not only anticipated but meticulously planned for, demonstrating a sophisticated understanding of military strategy, engineering, and urban planning. Military organization in post-classic cities was professionalized. Warriors were trained in specialized combat skills, including the use of atlatls, obsidian edge swords, spears, and defensive shields. Hierarchically organized units ensured coordinated defense and efficient offensive operations. Evidence of military training spaces, armories, and weapons caches indicates that warfare was institutionalized rather than ad hoc. Warrior elites often held dual roles as military leaders and ceremonial officials, blending martial authority with ritual and political legitimacy. The presence of strategically placed watchtowers along trade routes and observation points overlooking cenotes illustrates the integration of tactical intelligence with urban and environmental planning. Trade and warfare were closely linked in northern Maya cities. Control over critical trade routes, such as those connecting inland production centers with coastal ports, was essential for maintaining urban prosperity and political power. Cities that dominated trade could leverage economic influence to secure military alliances or deter rival attacks. Archaeological evidence of standardized weights, trade goods, and imported luxury items, including obsidian, jade, copper, salt, feathers, and textiles, demonstrates the scale of commerce and its role in sustaining urban centers. Military campaigns were often designed to protect or expand trade networks, underscoring the interdependence of economic and martial strategies. Political struggle in northern cities extended beyond external warfare. Internal competition among elite factions frequently determined access to ceremonial authority, military command, and trade privileges. Councils of nobles and ritual specialists mediated these disputes, maintaining urban cohesion and preventing factional conflict from destabilizing the city. Public works projects, construction of ball courts, plazas, temples, and fortifications were often undertaken collaboratively, reflecting negotiated power, sharing, and fostering community engagement. This decentralized governance model allowed northern cities to remain politically stable while integrating southern migrants and managing complex urban populations. Ceremonial life was deeply intertwined with warfare and politics. Public festivals, rituals, and ball games served multiple purposes, reinforcing civic cohesion, legitimizing rulers and councils, commemorating victories, and integrating military success into religious narratives. Sacrificial practices, often involving captured enemies or symbolic offerings, demonstrated the link between ritual authority and martial prowess. Monumental architecture reflected both military and ceremonial priorities, with temples and plazas doubling as strategic observation points and public stages for rituals. Astronomical alignment in temple construction also reinforced the symbolic connection between celestial cycles, military strategy, and political authority. Northern cities also adapted warfare strategies to maximize efficiency while minimizing the destructive impact of conflict. Unlike the catastrophic siege warfare that contributed to the fall of southern capitals, northern campaigns were often targeted, focusing on securing trade routes, water sources, or rival settlements critical for economic and political dominance. Archaeological evidence of defensive architecture, strategically located watchtowers, and controlled access points shows careful planning designed to protect civilian populations while maintaining military advantage. This approach ensured that cities remained functional and culturally vibrant despite ongoing political tension. Education and military training were deeply integrated. Young males from elite or warrior families learned combat skills, tactical coordination, and leadership, while also receiving instruction in ceremonial protocols, calendrical calculations, and cosmology. These dual roles ensured that military competence was linked to social and religious legitimacy. Knowledge of astronomy, mathematics, and ritual practice guided both military campaigns and civic planning, demonstrating how intellectual traditions informed strategic decision-making. The Northern Maya approach to warfare and political struggle highlights resilience and adaptability. By professionalizing armies, decentralizing governance, and integrating ritual, economic, and environmental knowledge, post-classic cities avoided the vulnerabilities that had led to southern collapse. Military preparedness was not solely destructive. It supported urban stability, trade continuity, and social cohesion. Strategic planning, fortifications, and alliances allowed cities to survive regional stress, demonstrating that warfare in northern Maya cities was an instrument of survival, governance, and cultural preservation. In conclusion, post-classic northern Maya warfare and political struggle were multidimensional and deeply embedded in urban life. Northern cities learned from the failures of the southern capitals, integrating lessons about environmental management, resource control, and distributed authority. Military organization, fortification, trade strategy, and ritual legitimacy all function together to maintain urban stability. These strategies allowed northern cities to flourish as cultural, economic, and political centers, preserving Maya civilization long after the southern lowlands had fallen into decline. The social and political consequences of warfare in northern post-classic Maya cities extended far beyond the battlefield. Military organization influenced urban planning, civic administration, ritual practices, and economic strategies, creating an integrated system designed to ensure survival in an era of uncertainty. Unlike the southern capitals, which collapsed under the weight of environmental stress, political centralization, and internal revolt, northern cities demonstrated remarkable adaptability by embedding military readiness into the very fabric of daily life. This segment explores the enduring effects of warfare and political struggle on northern Maya society, showing how conflict shaped identity, hierarchy, and resilience. Fortifications were not merely defensive measures. They also shaped social organization. Residential neighborhoods were often designed to facilitate collective defense, with homes arranged in clusters that allowed for rapid mobilization of residents in the event of an attack. Archaeological evidence from Uxmal and Chichén Itzá shows interconnected courtyards, restricted entry points, and elevated observation platforms, suggesting that urban design intentionally integrated surveillance and protection into communal life. This physical structuring reinforced neighborhood cohesion, as families and craft guilds depended on one another to maintain both daily operations and collective security. Fortified public spaces also served ritual purposes, providing locations for ceremonies that reinforced social hierarchy and military prestige simultaneously. Political hierarchy in northern cities was closely linked to military capability. The military strategies of northern post-classic Maya cities were intricately linked to urban design, resource control, and social organization. Unlike the centralized dynastic warfare characteristic of classic southern cities, northern centers such as Chichén Itzá, Uxmal, Cobá, and Mayapán developed decentralized yet highly organized military systems. These systems allowed cities to coordinate defense, manage trade, and maintain political authority while integrating migrant populations and preserving ritual traditions. Military readiness was a fundamental aspect of urban life, influencing neighborhood organization, fortifications, ceremonial planning, and resource allocation. Fortifications in northern cities were carefully designed for both defensive and strategic purposes. Walls, terraces, elevated platforms, and watchtowers provided physical protection while maximizing surveillance of surrounding areas. Sakbiab, the elevated stone causeways linking neighborhoods, ceremonial complexes, and marketplaces, were fortified at key points to prevent incursions and protect vital trade routes. Observation posts overlooked cenotes, agricultural fields, and access corridors, enabling early warning and rapid deployment of warriors. The integration of fortifications with urban infrastructure demonstrates the Northern Maya emphasis on combining practicality, surveillance, and symbolic authority in military planning. Northern Maya warfare relied on standing military forces organized into hierarchies. Elite warriors, captains, and specialized units provided professional protection for cities, trade networks, and ceremonial centers. Training in weapon use, tactical coordination, and leadership began in youth and was often integrated with ritual and civic education. Warriors were trained in the use of atlatls, spears, obsidian-edged swords, and shields, while learning strategies for both defensive and offensive operations. Fortified neighborhoods, watchtowers, and sakbiab required continuous maintenance and manpower, while military mobilization diverted labor from agriculture, artisan production, and ritual construction. Repeated raids, sieges, or inter-city competition likely contributed to social unrest and population displacement. While warfare had previously reinforced elite authority and social cohesion, in times of economic and environmental stress, it became a destabilizing force. Ritual and religious life also underwent transformation during periods of decline. Ceremonial observances, ball games, and sacrificial rituals had long served to reinforce political legitimacy and communal cohesion. As social stress increased, participation in ritual life may have become inconsistent, and the capacity of elites to sanction ceremonial authority may have been diminished. Household and neighborhood rituals likely persisted, preserving cultural memory at the local level, but the scale and frequency of citywide ceremonies may have decreased. Religious adaptation, syncretism, and local innovation helped maintain spiritual continuity even as centralized ritual authority waned. Despite these challenges, northern post-classic Maya cities left a lasting legacy. Architectural innovations, such as Puke-style masonry, colonnaded halls, pyramids, and ceremonial plazas, influenced subsequent construction and provided a template for urban planning. Artistic and craft traditions, including pottery, textiles, murals, and stone carving, were transmitted to later communities and continued to inform Mesoamerican visual culture. Knowledge systems, particularly astronomy, mathematics, calendrics, and ritual practice, were preserved in codices, inscriptions, and oral traditions, ensuring continuity of intellectual heritage. The synthesis of Southern and Northern innovations that characterized post-classic culture became a defining feature of Maya identity for centuries to follow.